study session to order. We're having a study session initially, and then we're having a regular Planning Commission agenda. But I think what we can, well, I think we will do the Planning Commission meeting as we normally do with the Pledge of Allegiance at that time. Now we'll just get right into the study session. We also have verbal communications, and I would assume, Citizen Ray, you may want to say something. I'll give you the option of either speaking now or at the end, your choice. Which would you like? Okay, please do. He'll be here, but I don't know. Well, we did look for him. He'll be here in a minute, I'm sure.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, with regards to the subject at hand, I would like to offer my thoughts, okay, for the long term. I have come to the realization that the Town Council of Los Gatos, in my opinion, is acting irresponsibly and illegally on the library, okay, by taking all the funding from the RDA and spending it on a public building. And let me give you the basis for my concern, okay. Attachment 4 of the program, it's called the program, it's the law, it's the ordinance adopted by the Town Council for redevelopment area funding. Listen to this. Provision of infrastructure. A, street reconstruction programs, Almond Grove. Other areas. B, valley improvements, paving, drainage. C, downtown streetscape improvements, sidewalks, street trees. D, storm drain reconstruction, University, New York, Bachman, Masol, on and on. E, sanitary sewer reconstruction program, College Avenue, University, Elm Street, Grays, on and on. Then, at the very end, what does it say? Capitalize community, facilities, and buildings. The redevelopment program would provide limited funding for community facilities and buildings. Repeat, limited funding for community facilities and buildings. The library. Primary emphasis would be on geologic investigations, structural analysis, rehabilitation, expansion, and the seismic retrofit of buildings in the Civic Center. Period. End of story. In the face of this, the Town Council, in my opinion, is stealing the funding from the redevelopment area and future financing for 30 years. It's unlawful, illegal, it's breaking the law. And guess what? We're going to go to the district attorney and then probably to the FBI to call on their department that deals in such matters, okay? We did it in Orinda, called the FBI, and cleaned out all the rats. So look out.
Thank you, Senator Ray. All right, so now we'll go on to the subject of the special study session, and I'll ask Mr. Lortz to start the meeting.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Planning Commission, ladies and gentlemen. This evening's study session, and thank you for coming in early to hold the study session. This study session does have to do with the new Los Gatos Library project. And we're going to be discussing this tonight the conceptual design that has been developed through an extensive process that involved numerous community meetings, meetings with the architect and town staff, and also the library staff in terms of functionality. The project is just embarking on the formal application process through the town. As you know, the town processes public projects in a similar way as the private sector processes projects. So they do go through our public review process, and the first step in that process, of course, is the Planning Commission after the initial round of meetings that have been held to develop the conceptual design. We're going to turn this presentation over to Chris Knoll of Knoll and Tam Architects, who have been working with us for quite some time. Pamela Jacobs, the Assistant Town Manager, is here this evening to certainly answer any questions you may have, as well as the architect and library staff. The one thing that we would like to have the Planning Commission discuss and understand is that when it comes to the issue of story poles, it is not our intent to install story poles on the project, because, as you know, the lot where the project is proposed is used for overflow parking, and also the site encroaches into villa a little bit. So from a public safety perspective, there are clearly some issues. However, there are going to be a number of photo simulations and other graphic illustrative devices offered to ensure that not only the public but also this commission understands highest mass architecture. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris Knoll. Thank you, Bud, and very nice to be here in front of the Planning Commission tonight and to present some preliminary ideas about our project. We've been working on this for a little while now, and have done some presentations to the City Council and to the library, and we're sort of got to a point now where what we'd like to do is to show you what our preliminary ideas are for it, and to get some feedback from you. And I think that one of the first slides sort of talks about what our what our principles are.
Apparently, if you would speak up a little bit, or we can turn the mic up. I'm not sure. Why don't you speak up? That may be easier.
Is this on? Is that better? Okay. I'll try to remember to keep it right up in front. So the first principles that we have for the design of the library, and this is where we are looking for your feedback, are some of these ideas that we are up on the screen right now. First and foremost, it's that it's warm and inviting. We've thought a lot about, what is appropriate in the town of Los Gatos, and what would work well for you, and not only in the town, but also in the particular location that it is in the Civic Center. But always coming back in all of our design decisions to the idea that it is going to be warm and inviting. It needs to work with the existing Civic Center. This building has a strong character. It's a sort of a very modern building, has a very sort of particular materials to it. We don't think we're going to match the design of this building, but we want to create something that's going to work with it. It's going to be a building that responds to nature and incorporates natural materials. It's a spectacular site tucked in against the base of that hillside with all the trees and the vegetation, and the town itself has that as one of the items of its real character. And so what we want to do is to bring natural materials and colors and textures into the building whenever we can. We want to enhance the Civic Center. We want to have this building work with the existing Civic Center to create something that's greater than just the sum of the two buildings, that they work together and create something that is really nice, that they work together. Inside the building, there are going to be some fairly large spaces in this building. It's a library, there aren't a lot of walls, and it's It's a big building, so there are going to be some grand spaces, but we also want to make them very comfortable within those. And so that's the principle we always come back to, is how do we make people feel comfortable, even though it's a sort of a large, tall space with lots of glass. It's going to be a place where you're looking in and out of all the time. It is, going to have a lot of glass, particularly sort of facing north towards Main Street, and we want people to be able to see inside and what's going on in the library. At the same time, you get these great views both in that direction, but also sort of up into the hillside. LEED is the in sustainability program that we're going to be following. We have LEED Silver, which is the minimum standard that we're going to follow. As we proceed through the design, we might achieve even higher grade than that, but at a minimum, we're going to try to achieve LEED Silver. And as a part of that process, we're going to make the sustainable design features of the building something that's visible to the users of it, both things you can see, but also interpretive exhibits, and sort of making them things that people can touch and understand, and make that an educational opportunity. The building is going to be about 30,000 square feet. It's going to be a 2-story building, and we have pushed it to the back of the Civic Center, right up toward the base of the hillside where the parking area and that house is in the back there. And I'll show you the site plan in a moment. What this allows us to do is, one, it sort of conforms with the Civic Center master plan that was done several years ago, so we will conform with the location of the library on that plan. We're going to maintain the lawn from Main Street to the parking area, and we're going to maintain most of that parking area back toward the building. And the back part of that lot is then going to be built on partly by the library, and we're going to have to adjust parking and traffic patterns through the site. So this is the site plan. It is a preliminary site plan, very much conceptual. We are now in the process of developing both the site plan and the building design, and we will be back, after a period of time when we've developed this further with an update on it. But this is kind of where we're starting right now. We need to, one thing, first and foremost, we need to work with the fire department so that the access through the site meets their requirements. And that might change a few things here. But some of the key features of this, and maybe I'll just walk over here, are that it's got strong connections between Main Street and the plaza and the library. We want this to have a really sort of strong pedestrian connection, not only to the library, but beyond up to Pageant Park. There are a lot of large trees out here. The building is going to be behind all those trees, and so when we get to the visual simulations, you'll see that in some ways it's going to be almost hard to see this building from Main Street, but it is a sort of a fairly large building hidden back in there. But we want these connections to be very strong. There are a lot of mature trees, and we're going to preserve all of the trees on the site that we possibly can. There's a large oak right here and a spruce tree right here. There's another large oak up there. There are trees on the hillside, and of course all the trees in the front are going to be preserved. We are going to keep as much of this front area in the parking lot and the street here intact as possible. That's sort of partly to sort of keep it the way it is, but also to maintain sort of a budget for budget reasons, and not to spend any more money than we need to. We're going to have a circulation change as you come back through here from Villa to Fiesta. Right now, those streets connect, but the library is now going to be built sort of over the Villa Avenue street itself. And so we're going to need to change that connection, and that's where the fire department, we will be working with them to determine exactly what it is. We're also going to be working with the community in this neighborhood to talk about these ideas. So we are going to be taking this to community group meetings in the neighborhood to talk about the specifics of how we're actually laying this out. There is additional parking that's going to be created as part of this. There are 2 houses in here that will be relocated, and so we're going to make this into parking. We're going to use the parking up in that area here, and we're going to provide the amount of parking, additional parking from what exists right now, and we're going to meet the requirements of the master plan for the Civic Center. We're going to integrate bioswales. There's some in here, and wherever else we have green areas, we're going to use bioswales to filter the runoff from the parking areas and the buildings before they go into the storm sewer. That's partly a requirement and partly part of our sustainability goals. We're going to create sunny outdoor gathering areas wherever we can. We're anticipating, some space in front of the existing Civic Center and over here in the plaza, and also some space behind the building that will be sunny and protected. So those are sort of the main features of the site plan. Maybe now I'll sort of move on and talk a little bit more about the building itself. You can see how the slope of the building comes down, the slope of the hillside behind comes down to the building. We are sort of pushing this building back against the hillside, but not so far that we need to do a lot of excavation or retaining walls. We're going to try to avoid those as much as possible, keeping or sort of modifying the existing old winery, sort of historic walls that are there, but possibly using new walls in front of them because they're not structurally sound. So they might just sort of get buried and sort of disappear, but then re-landscaping the hillside so that it is attractive and stable. The building itself, as you can see, is 2 stories, 2 fairly tall stories. These are very large spaces within the library, and so if they have very low ceilings, they get to feel very oppressive. So we're sort of having ceilings that are about 12 to 14 feet on both of these floors, and even having a higher part in the center that's going to bring light into the center of the building, so it's a very light-filled building. One of the things that we keep coming back to when we design libraries is, trying to get as much natural light into them as we possibly can, and that's one way that we're doing it. It also is very good from a sustainability point of view. Can we move? These are the sort of, again, going back to some of the principles of our design that we talked about before, and we do see the building as a lantern, as it were, which is something that glows. And so at nighttime, we envision this building having a really sort of beautiful appearance. It's a glowing jewel. You'll be able to see it sort of from Main Street, we believe, and the Civic Center as something that glows. But in the daytime, all that light is going to be coming in. So it's a transparent object. We will have to control the light on the various sides from direct sun for sustainability and energy reasons. But as much transparency as we can is one of our principles. These are some ideas that we're working with. These are just sort of design inspirations, but also sort of principles that we come back to. As you can see, what I said before about large open spaces, you can say really require high ceilings. But we also want to make sure, and you can sort of see it in some of these photographs, that even though it's a very large open space, it still has, human scale. It's not a cold airport-like space. It's going to be something that has warmth and texture and human scale and sort of be a comfortable place to sit. Again, we're going to have a stairway that's going to go up. The lower center picture here is kind of like the stairway that's going to connect the 2 floors with an opening between the 2. As you come in the front entrance, you're going to be able to see through this, and there will be a double height space that connects them. So a bit of the building is going to be 2 stories high. These are some images that sort of show how a building will glow at night and sort of have this transparency, and just some ideas of what that might be like. Again, there are a lot of trees between this building and Main Street, so it's going to be quite filtered view that you'll get of the building. But we do need to control the light. And so on the south side of the building, and particularly on the east and west sides of the buildings, any window openings that we have are going to have louvers and other things on them to control the light. And that's a functional, practical reason. But also we're going to use them sort of as aesthetic ways of sort of breaking down the scale of the building, bringing in textures and materials on all sides. And it will be one of those features that sort of is a sustainability feature that sort of shows, people what we're doing. So these are more sort of ideas. We'll probably have photovoltaic cells incorporated either on the roof or on the elevations in some fashion. This partly depends upon, upon funding. And then we have the idea of express structure, so that the columns and the structure that we see are things that we're going to look at. We're going to expose the structure here and make it into something that's expressive of the sort of the nature of it, of the how the building is constructed. This is a view of it from the front. It's an oblique angle. You can see on the upper floors, it's very, very open. This is the adult reading area over here, the technology and the teen area. It faces north. We don't have to have much shading on it, and we're going to try to make this as transparent as possible. You'll be able to look in, you'll see the structure, you'll see the lights and things like that. This is the front entrance that comes in under a canopy. The staff area on this side and the children's area on this side are going to have more solid volumes that will have more punched openings in it. So there'll be sort of a more solid base to the building and a much more sort of light and transparent top to it. The west and east elevations, like that over there, are going to be much more solid. That's where we get the really strong, low light that's hard to control. We're going to have fewer windows there, and the ones that are going to be there are going to be shaded with louvers and other things like that. Oh, so is that our last slide? Yeah. Materials up here? Go ahead. Oh, sorry. And the exterior materials, I was going to go to the table there, but the ideas on the materials for the building are going to, again, be natural materials and colors so that they relate to the existing civic center. We aren't proposing to use brick per se, but we are proposing to use possibly terracotta and natural stone in large panels, as you can sort of see on the more solid areas. The windows systems would be aluminum systems, possibly with integrated louvers. They would be a painted aluminum system, probably not sort of metal colored. We would use wood in judicious but sort of effective ways around our openings in terms of ceilings, possibly overhangs and things like that. And there'll be a lot of glass in the building because it's going to be very transparent. And then steel, the structure of the building will be steel, and that's kind of where we are. These are some other elevations that show some of the other materials that are very similar to that. This is the south elevation. This one faces the hillside, sort of tucked in there. It's a sort of, we might be doing stucco, an integral color stucco on this thing, maybe one or two colors, possibly with stone or precast concrete sills and louvers on the window, trying to create as much texture as we can, and also be cost effective because we need to stretch our budget as far as it will go. East and west elevations show fewer openings, much more controlled in terms of how the light is. The east elevation has the staff area on the ground floor, some reading areas and stack areas on the upper floor. And then on the west elevation, we have the main adult reading room here and the children's area down below. These are our floor plans. Again, these are preliminary at this point, and they're being developed right now, and we'll have more developed once as we come in. One of the main features here is that as you come into the lobby area of the building, you have a slot through the building that is one transparent view all the way through. The stairway comes up to the second floor here, but beyond that is a quiet reading area for magazines and periodicals that then looks out into a small garden in the back that's sort of tucked in behind the hillside. In the front are new books, the circulation desk, and a cafe. So this is a very sort of bustling area where you have a lot of display. It's kind of a retail-like feeling to it, and that's where the reserves will be, and people will kind of come in here and use this. It'll be fairly noisy, although I think the periodicals area in the back will have some protection from that, and it will probably also have a small fireplace in the back. Just to the right is the children's area. This is a fairly large children's area. It's going to have a story time area. It's going to have its own restrooms and sort of picture books and computers and then juvenile fiction and nonfiction in this area. All the staff area is over there on the left side. We have our book returns and technical processing at the front. We have our library staff at the back, and in between we have mechanical and storage areas. We also have a lot of self-check, so we're going to try to automate a lot of the checkout functions on this and sort of allow staff to do more, sort of useful functions. On the upper floors, you get to the top, we're going to have a circulation service point right here, and then our fiction and nonfiction books are in these areas and over there. Our teen area is sort of a main feature over here. They're going to have their own corner here, but they'll also be very visible from the staff. It's going to have it's going to be a really nice place for teens with some interesting furniture and colors and be very sort of bright and cheery and be able to look out in the front and feature them. Our technology lab is here in the center. This is where a lot of computers are going to be. A group study room here, another group study room at the back. This is our history area, so the history materials are going to be in the back here, and media in the middle, and then service and restrooms kind of in that central core right there. So, just some of the sort of basic facts. We have a budget for it that we're being very careful to sort of plan for and to sort of get as much bang for the buck as we can out of how we design the library and using materials very judiciously. We have our environmental review process that's under review right now, and we expect to start construction sometime in 2010 and be open for business in 2011. On the table down here in front, we've brought a bunch of materials to give you an idea of what some of these things are that we might use. Again, this is very preliminary, but these are terracotta panels here that might be used, to relate to the brick of this building, but not mimic it. We have natural stone materials over here. These are some of the ideas of bringing natural materials in, as partitions and lights inside, of bringing things like that. A lot of wood. We're going to get as much wood in there as we can, and wood is fairly expensive, so we'll use it very carefully, but we expect to have wood ceilings in the upper floor reading room, and on sort of paneling, and the bookcases. Some of the bookcases might be made out of wood downstairs. And these are some ideas about stucco on the back side and maybe on the east and west side, so we might be using some stucco in there. Aluminum window systems, but in painted colors, that we can get either a standard or a custom color for the aluminum windows. And then other sort of interesting materials that we're going to use throughout the library, sort of high-tech materials that are very light that we can use for windows, for partitions, for tables, and things like that. Carpeting on the floors in some areas. We are going to have raised floor systems in the building for our mechanical air distribution, so the air will be coming up from below. It's a very energy efficient way to do that. And it also allows a lot of flexibility in sort of technology as well. And some interesting acoustical materials we might use that will absorb the sound really well, and always sort of trying to find the angle on sustainability for all of our selections of the interior materials. I think if you look at these, you can sort of get a sense, I hope, of what we're talking about being warm and inviting. We're thinking of, sort of nice natural colors. It's not going to be a sort of a hard, high-tech looking building. It's going to have sort of clean lines and crisp design and really nice warm materials that are sort of nice to touch and to be with. So, enough of me talking. I'd be very glad to hear any comments or questions you might have.
Some of the commissioners have questions. Commissioner Machici?
Putting together a building like this, how long do you anticipate it's going to last? Is this at 50, 100 years?
Buildings these days are generally designed to last about, 30 years or 40 years before you have to do a major renovation to them, and then they can last even longer if you build them out of, steel or concrete, which is what this would be.
Your own research. I recently went to a technology seminar where they were discussing the future of various technologies. One of the side issues that came up was the transitions that libraries are going through, of being a center of information right now to becoming a center of culture. What changes here are you anticipating to happen over the next 40 years, and have you designed for that type of change?
Libraries have undergone a huge amount of change since I've had my career doing a lot of libraries. The technology has been a real driving force behind it. And one of the things we've done to sort of react to that and to accommodate that is to design buildings that are as flexible as possible, because we have absolutely no idea what the next thing is going to be coming down the road. So, we try to not have too many walls in the building. And Right, and so acoustics become very important. How do we control the transmission of sound from one end of the room to the other? And so we spend a lot of time doing that. But, if you have fixed walls and fixed structure, then it limits your opportunities to change other things. I mean, one of the things you'll notice about the floor plan is that it has an awful lot of seating now. It has more seating than the existing library by far, and the proportion of seating to books is also greater, because these are places that people want to come to sort of sit and meet people and to do things, and it's not just a place to come get a book. In terms of meeting future needs of the community, we sort of are hoping we're designing something that's really flexible and that it can be rearranged and shifted around. The raised floor systems are really useful in that regard, because you can sort of move stacks out of the way and put a table there, pick up a panel and plug in a computer, and then you're ready to go. Or you can build a wall on top of it and enclose a room if you want to. It's all quite easy to manipulate.
Other questions? Commissioner Telesfor?
Yeah, you talked about the use of wood and making the library warm and inviting. I'm curious, you're going to be using steel on the outside, and then you spoke about louvered window coverings. I'm wondering, would it be possible to think about using wooden louvered window coverings to soften the, the appearance of something so stiff?
We're definitely considering it. I think budget will be something that might sort of limit us in some of our choices, but some of the louvers that I showed in those slides are wood, and some of them are sort of these interesting shapes, like an airfoil shape that is also sort of covered in wood, in a thin veneer of wood, but underneath that it's metal. We like wood.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, because of it, like those right there. I mean, wood has such a wonderful texture to it. It feels like a natural material, and we would use
well,
as
and
much as we
especially
can.
because this building will be up against the mountain or the side of the hill, and
Yes.
there'll be trees around it. It would really almost fit. It would, not be so hard edged. And for me, it would look like it would fit.
Yeah.
Another question I had was the sides of the building. Now, we have a villa that has homes on it, and that will be blocked off, right?
Yes.
So what I'm concerned about is the side of that building fitting in with that neighborhood residential feeling as far as design, so that they're not looking at a wall. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be a wall.
I mean,
but
it'll
it's going to be a
wall,
really
but
nice
you know
wall.
what I'm
We
saying?
hope.
Not a.
Yeah.
I mean, are you planning on putting a lot of
the east elevation? The east elevation.
landscaping around that, or?
It's going to have landscaping, and so that's the east elevation. I mean, that's a very preliminary drawing. We just sort of sketched that up very quickly, and that's under development now. So
That's just.
how we sort of treat that wall, we're going to make it into something that has lots of ins and outs. It has louvers on it. It's going to have, natural materials like stone or terracotta and stucco, and maybe patches of wood. Parts of it might be wood. We're thinking some of those lighter bands are sort of possibly wood. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be as sort of nice as we can. And then it has a parking area in front of it and a loading zone that's going to have places for trees and landscaping to go in. So things that we have to grow in.
Thank you. Mr. Donald, I have like two quick questions because I don't want to take this all over. But another question I had was your periodical room, and then there's a courtyard outside of that. Is there an opportunity there to, I take it those are windows. Is there an opportunity there to make that a wall that could be opened up with, like a window wall, so that that whole area, I don't know if they thought about this, but since there's a courtyard out there, I was thinking sometimes libraries have events, or they could have events, and community people, organizations could maybe use it, so that there'd be an opportunity to expand out into that area and, actually make that courtyard more usable.
Good idea. Good idea. Yeah, it is all glass from side to side, so we are looking at it as completely transparent, but we hadn't sort of put an entire wall that could be opened up. It gets a little expensive, but, it is something to think about. We'll take that under consideration.
And then the other thought was that you don't have walls, but would there be opportunity later, if you couldn't afford to do it now, to install movable walls, or walls that would fold against themselves so that you could either close spaces off or open them up?
You mean upstairs or downstairs?
Anywhere, in lots of places. I mean, I don't have the time to go through, I mean, I could, but.
We could do that. I think it sort of comes down to what the library program, is, and whether that they have a need for that. We often use those in community meeting rooms when we want to have one big room or two small rooms or three small rooms, and they're very useful for that. But we don't have any community meeting rooms in the library per se now. We have one conference room that is going to be able to be used both by staff and by the public.
Right.
But we're anticipating that possibly, community meeting rooms would remain in this building. But yeah, well, if it seems like an opportunity, the teen area might be something we could close off. The children's area certainly will be closed off, but it has a very large opening.
Right. I noticed that the bathrooms, I know spaces at a premium on this, and I just was wondering, there's 2 bathrooms for the children's area. Would there be opportunity to have one that could be used, sort of the new way now to, could be either or, men or women could use that bathroom?
Well, we're working to develop this plan right now, and at this point we have 2 family restrooms in the children's area, 2 public restrooms just off the periodicals area, and then 2 staff restrooms in the staff area. So I think there'll be lots of restrooms to go around when we get done. And they'll all have changing tables in them for babies.
Are there other comments or questions? Just Commissioner Erickson.
In addition to the evolution that Commissioner Machici was talking about in terms of the nature of the way we store and retrieve information, have you thought about the inevitable growth in the collection of libraries, and how much will you accommodate that growth? You can do it in multiple ways. You can do it with off-site storage. You can do it with compact shelving. Compact shelving would, I assume, require different kind of structural requirements. And like I said, so it's both the change in the medium, but also the inevitable growth in collections that occur over time.
Well, we are indicating in our plans a pretty significant growth in the existing collections to sort of meet these needs. What we're finding because of technology is that collections actually don't need to grow as much as they might have because there's so many online resources that are available. And that those are the things that have really grown, are the access to computers, and to other sources of data. And that's why we have so much more seating, and tables and computers in the library than we did before. So we'll always have books, but they aren't going to grow, I don't think, at as fast a rate as they once did.
Following up on his question, though, I don't think I got the answer. Have you provided for the growth of the collection, whether it's as fast as it used to be or whether it's slower than it used to be?
Yes, the way we've designed our shelving is that it's got extra height that we're not currently planning to use. So there'll be at least a shelf and a half high on each of these units of shelving that isn't going to have any collection on it.
Yes.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate question for you, and I haven't seen it answered somewhere else, so if you don't know the answer, that's fine. But what's the existing library space anticipated to be used for, and how are you incorporating that into the site plans for the potential new library?
Chris, I'll respond to that. Thank you. We will be looking at the space that will be vacated by the library and developing a use plan for that, kind of concurrently towards the latter part of working on developing the library itself. Some things that have been identified is a community room, because we weren't able to include that in the library given our space and budget constraints. So we will be looking at community room. We will have to accommodate some staff that will be relocated from, for example, the house that houses HR currently, and looking at that, and as well as looking at potentially, I know that we've heard from the Friends of the Library about maybe some additional space for storage for them over there, because there may not be enough in the new library. So that's something that the town will be doing separately from the architects.
Any further comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Sayak.
I was fortunate enough to participate in your design charrette for sustainability, and we had enough time so that we went into a lot more details. And I'm just curious, as your plans have progressed, have there been any changes that you might have identified or found that need to be made since we last met?
Not really. We're just in the beginning part of that process, and so we're fleshing out, what the systems are. Our mechanical systems are kind of turning out the way we thought they would be. We're going to have, the underfloor air distribution, which is kind of what we thought we would do that, and that has proven to be feasible. And we've sort of figured out how we're going to be running ducts and getting access to all of that, and where we're going to put our units. We're going to have, 2 units so that we can run a portion of the building in a different cycle than another for energy efficiency. Structural systems kind of turning out the way we thought it would. We haven't, the daylighting part of it, that's we thought we wanted a lot of daylight, and that's all coming together just the way we had hoped, with a lot of glass and that clear stories that run down the center of the upper floor and bringing light down into the building. So I think we're solidly in the middle of the LEED silver certification number of points. And we're going to be looking to increase that, as we go into the process and, get as much sustainability into this building as we possibly can. So I think we feel very much on track.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, we have Commissioner Talaswar.
Do we have enough time? I mean, I don't want to take all the time here. So quickly, the circulation, I'm walking into the library and I see that the circulation and to check out books and to ask a question of someone is way over in the corner, and I'm wondering why that wouldn't. It's not very obvious, is my point. And I'm just wondering if how you would expect someone to find, to walk into a building you're not familiar with and have to find somebody when you have a quick question.
Well, we've already made some changes, and that's going to be moving a little bit closer to the entrance. I think it'll be a bit more visible in the plan as we currently have it. Okay. But it's also partly deliberate to sort of push it back a little bit, because what we want to bring to the forefront now are self-check machines. We want to encourage people to do as much self-service as possible, which frees up library staff to do other things that are more patron-friendly and focused.
But the person who has a question,
never to really hide it.
Yeah. Okay, and so then my other question is, can you talk about the cafe, and is that how does that work? Is that vending machines, or is that actually someone behind a counter?
The way we're planning it now is it's going to be vending machines, and it's going to have, the potential, like hookups for a coffee cart or some other sort of small, food and beverage service that might serve the lobby area. But it's pretty small in terms of scale.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Sayak.
Question about technology. I noticed that you have a specific area for your technology lab, but I'm just assuming and just agree with it that you'll have Wi-Fi and outlets at all the tables for people who bring in their own?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'm going to say for anybody that got here late, we had comment option when we started, but some of you were not here. If any of you were here specifically for this study session and have any comments, and we have a few minutes, I just want to make sure somebody didn't come here and expecting to say something and I forgot to ask you. So if any of you do, we've had one speaker so far, but if anybody else wants to speak, if they'd let me know, you can do that. Seeing no hands, I thank you very much. There are no other questions, and there's no further presentation. I think we can adjourn this meeting, and we'll begin the Planning Commission meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what happened.
It's really out of the ordinary that they don't.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Planning Commission. I have a few just early words to say to you. For some of you have been here before, some of you have not. But this is the meeting of the Planning Commission, and I just ask all of you to keep in mind that there's the Town Council, which by and large makes the laws, and the Planning Commission, which by and large interprets and applies those laws. And sometimes we make recommendations to the Town Council, and sometimes we actually take action, and it would stop here if it were not appealed. So when you appear before us, if you keep that in mind and see what it is we're doing, that will help you when you make a presentation to us. If you wish to speak on a matter this evening, there are cards behind the benches. If you'd please fill it out, tell us which agenda item you want to speak on, and give the clerk a copy of that. It'll be brought over here, and then you can speak. We'll call on you. An applicant will be given up to 5 minutes for their opening statement. Then the public will be invited to speak, and the public normally can have up to 3 minutes to speak. And then it goes back to the applicant, who can have up to 3 minutes to speak. And that's really the rubric here. I would just remind you, if any of you have noise-making instruments such as cell phones, I'd ask you to silence them. And that being the case, I think that's all the preparatory remarks. So now, if we can take the roll.
Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Jensen? Here. Commissioner Sayoc? Here. Commissioner Machichi?
Here.
Commissioner Talasfor? Here. Vice Chair Bourgeois?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell?
Here. Now, if you'd all join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd ask Commissioner Machichi to lead us.
We pledge allegiance
To the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item we have is the minutes of February 25th. May I have a motion on those minutes? Are some comments?
I'm going to be recusing myself. I was absent.
Okay. Commissioner Jensen. Commissioner Bourgeois.
I move to approve the minutes of February 25th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And there are 2 recusals. We have no requested continuances this evening. Are there any subcommittee reports? Commissioner Machichi?
The Historical Committee did not meet last night, but the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee met tonight on a request on Howard, which is the start of the hillside area. Applicant wanted to convert it to 2 lots from a single lot, which would require a general plan and zoning designation change, as well as a density change. And I would say the conclusion was we would discourage them, or tell him if he is going to go through with it, to really do his homework on it before he spent any money doing it.
Thank you. Yes. Commissioner Bourgeois?
The General Plan Advisory Committee met last Thursday, and we discussed half of the background materials for the General Plan update. And we're going to be discussing the next half a week from tomorrow, so in 2 Thursdays, and that's at the community center, neighborhood center, if anyone wants to attend.
The next item we have are verbal communications from the audience on matters that are not before us, and a speaker can speak for up to 3 minutes. I don't have any cards, but I have a premonition that Citizen Ray has a card in his hand. So, Citizen Ray, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, I have the cards here, so. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Ann Machichi. What was that? You put your hand to your face. Did you have finger get stuck or something? Oh, okay. Thank you. I know, you're always a polite guy. Ain't we got fun down here? First off, I want to pass along to the Commission as a whole the information that I've gotten that at the recent council retreat, there was a discussion by the council of reducing the Planning Commission from 7 to 5, okay? Wasn't on the agenda at all, but I understand it took place. So just be aware, okay? That battle's been fought before, and the portion of the council that was pushing that lost, and the commission was kept at 7, and for a wonderful reason. The public interest comes first, and the dollar bill will come last. So let's see if they try to reactivate that and turn the commission into a bunch of stooges. That, of course, would be the game plan. Next. Next Monday, the renaissance of Los Gatos Planning Department begins. Mrs. Wendy Rooney, shows up for her first day of work as the brand new planning director. And it's goodbye to Lortz. Thank goodness. Woo! So, stay tuned for honesty and integrity in the planning department of Los Gatos. All right. Also, have you seen the story poles at the old Swanson Ford dealership on Los Gatos Boulevard down by Lark? Have you seen that ugliness? 2- and 3-story buildings right smack on the boulevard. The dollar bill gang in this community will never give up if they can feel they can make a dollar bill at the expense of the community. Okay. Here we have in this town a street plan laid out 100 years ago, plus. And the developers don't want to realize that. They don't understand the street plan regulates the future of Los Gatos unless we all want to turn into a mess of congestion. So, take a look at the story poles, okay?
Thank you, Citizen.
Oh, looks like a red light.
Thank you.
I've got a lot more, but you know, I'm a guy that always plays by the rules.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the items on the agenda. I will first say this. I will be recusing myself on the first item, and I want to explain what recusal is for some of you who have not perhaps heard that before. If a commissioner either has a conflict, thinks they may have a conflict, or for other good reason thinks they should not sit on a matter, they recuse themselves, they leave the room, and they return on the next item. This evening, I will be recusing myself on item 1. When we get to item 2, 3 of the commissioners will recuse themselves, and we'll talk about the reasons when we get there. I am recusing myself simply because I represented the developer of the project for the first project. Nothing to do, that I know of, with the matter before us this evening. But because I represented the McCarthys in developing that site, it appeared to me that I should not sit in on this. So I will be recusing myself. The vice chair, John Bourgeois, will take over from there. So I'm going to now leave the room, and I will be back for item number 2.
Thank you. So we'll just let Commissioner O'Donnell leave the room before we get started here. All right, on to item number 1. Item number 1 is at 20105 Foster Road and is requesting approval to construct a new single-family residence on property zoned HR 2.5 PD. And Ms. Davis, do you have the staff report?
Good evening. The project is, it's actually 2 parcels, and we're going to put a map up here so I can explain this a little better for you. Okay, the McCarthy plan development is all the way at the top of Foster Road. We had 6 residential lots created by the approval of that plan development. Lot 5 is already developed with a residence, and that's the McCarthy residence. And there's a new home under construction on Lot 2, which is abutting this property. The property that's outlined is the applicant's site, and that is actually 2 parcels that have been purchased by the applicant and combined as one site. We have an approved residence for Lot 6. I believe the staff report said Lot 1, and I apologize, that was an incorrect lot number. Lot 6 has an approved house that has not yet started construction, and that house is a single-story, 18-foot height house. The home on Lot 2 that is nearly done is also a single-story, 18-foot high residence. The McCarthy residence was approved prior to adoption of Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, so I believe it is higher than 18 feet, but the guidelines were not in place yet, so that house was approved by the Planning Commission at that time under the current criteria. The applicant is proposing a 2-story residence. Staff felt this site was visible and that the house should be single-story, 18 feet. The applicant feels that the house will not be visible from the viewing platforms, and will speak to that when they get up and do their presentation. Besides the issue of the height, we have 2 plans that weren't completed as part of the initial plan set. One is there's not a landscape plan that's done right now, and the grading and drainage plan is incomplete. We felt there was a greater issue in addressing the 1-story versus 2-story house, and moved it forward to the Planning Commission. We did do architecture review, and the architect felt that it is well designed, and but it also could lend itself to a 1-story design with the same architectural style that's being proposed. We also had an arborist look at the trees that are screening the lower part of the site. They are not on the property itself, they're on another site, but we felt it was important to at least look at the health of those trees, since that's what's being relied on for screening of this project site. The proposed house is about 5,500 square feet. There's a 3-car garage. It's 840 square feet. Size-wise, the house is compatible with homes in the area. The other 3 homes that have been proposed or that have been approved already are in that same size range. And in fact, the McCarthy residence is larger. So we didn't take issue with the size of the house. It's simply the height, and we felt it's a very visible site. When you're up on that site, you can see that there are sweeping views, and when you can see down, you can generally see up from a multitude of locations. And so our predominant concern is the height and whether they should be held to a single-story design. When the PD was approved, there is nothing actually in the PD addressing new residences in terms of the details. It just says that they should conform to the Hillside standards. When the Hillside standards were adopted in 2004, the town council did have a discussion about this. Mr. McCarthy, the developer of the PD, did ask at that time for relief from the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, given that his project was already an approved PD. It was well down the road, and he had removed Guadalupe College, which was a fairly unsightly collection of buildings up there on the hillside, and was just going to be putting 6 new homes in. There were 2 criteria that were considered at that time. One was size, and one was the height restriction for visible home sites. And the council at that time decided not to give any kind of exemption or exception to that property, and said that the Hillside standards would apply to it. So that leads us to where we are today, and I don't have any other issues with the project to relate to you at this time. If you have any questions, staff is available.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Machici.
Lots 1 and 2, did the applicants ask for going over the 18 feet?
No, they did not. When they came in, they were advised by staff to keep them at 18 feet, 1 story. In fact, Lot 2, we put story poles up to make that determination, and then the applicant designed a 1-story house. They did get an exception for a skylight element that comes up to a point, and a small part of that skylight went above 18 feet, and that got an exception granted by Planning Commission.
Commissioner Talasfora.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification on the 2 lots being melded into 1. Has that been recorded in the PD?
If you look up there, you see it's still 2 lots. He's just purchased 2 different properties there. The one that shows as parcel 3 is the one that the house would actually be located on. And there's no requirement that he merge these or anything. He's just purchased 2 properties.
Okay.
So it's that upper part of parcel 3 is where that flat pad sits, where the story poles are located.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and call the applicant up. I do not have a card, so if you would fill out before you leave today. You can do it at the end of the, yeah. So when you come up, please introduce yourself, and then you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Bill Kioki. I'm a friend of the owner. I'm trying to help him through the process. I live here in Los Gatos. Thank you for clarifying some of the mistakes. We had picked up on that as well. I do want to expand on a few things. The completed house that is Joe McCarthy's house is on Lot 5, and it is a ridgetop. It is 8,300 square feet, and it does exceed the 18-foot as a ridgetop, but less than 25% of that house is visible. The current house that's under construction on Lot 2, you did point out, and I wanted to make sure that I pointed that out, that there is it's a rather large element. He did get approval to go over the 18-foot limit to 22 feet on the house. So that's a pretty massive skylight up there. The roof planes do come together, and it continues on beyond it. So some sort of an exception was granted for that. As you pointed out, Suzanne pointed out, it is both Mr. Singh's house and the neighbor's house are in the 5,000 square foot range. The only other thing that I want to expand on in terms of the other parcels is the other parcel that has an approved house, Lot 6. That was a set of plans for a 7,100 square foot house, and the plans were produced, admittedly in better days, by the developer as a spec or to entice somebody to buy it. I think the plans were initially approved in 2005. I spoke to Mr. McCarthy on Monday, and he said they have no intentions of building it. They were just granted their last approval on that house. Obviously, economic times have changed, and nobody's going to build something like that purely on spec. That house on Lot 2 and the one on Lot 6 are both very visible. They're close to the edge of the hill. The hill kind of sweeps around. The terrain is dropping away, and there are fewer trees there to restrict the view. So these lots aren't all equal on flat land. There are very material differences when you look at them from the viewing platform. The only other lot I'd like to draw attention to is Lot 1. That's the bigger one down below. And given its larger size and ability to push the house back and a number of trees that are there, it's quite likely that that house would qualify for a 2-story as well. No story poles are up, but it's clearly got a lot of obstructions in terms of meeting that. The second clarification I'd like to make is with regard to the analysis of the visibility of the Singh's home. Mr. and Mrs. Singh's house meets the town's requirement, which is less than 25% visible. In fact, according to the field study, and hopefully you've got in your packet the color photocopies of the photos and the study that was done, all right? 13% of the house is visible from one viewing platform. You have 6 or 7, only one can you see it, and then 13% is visible, well within the guidelines for 25% or less. The house is set back from the slope. The Singhs want a very usable backyard. This is important to them. And so there is considerable terrain blocking the view of the house. And additionally, there are a number of trees, which we hired an arborist to do a study on that, to evaluate those trees. According to Mr. McCarthy, the trees that are on parcel 1, these trees are not on the Singh's property, are in an area that is, quote, protected. These are protected trees. They're on the edge of Lot 1, and these trees are actually right next to Foster Road on some relatively steep terrain. So the pad is graded. There will be no additional grading on that property. It's a very large pad. So these trees will not be removed. They can't be removed. They are protected. They're outside the envelope in terms of where any building can or will be done. The hillside development standards and guides does not specify that trees cannot be used to determine visibility, nor is there a requirement that trees can only be considered if they're on the subject parcel. We've been told that because the trees weren't on the parcel, that perhaps they wouldn't count. To deny the use of these trees, trees that are naturally occurring and are in an area that cannot be disturbed sets, in our opinion, a difficult precedent in which all trees would have to be removed when considering all future homes, including trees in town that block much of the hillside area. Imagine, if you can't count trees that are off of your property, what are we supposed to do? Remove all of the trees in town? Because when you're down on the viewing platforms, there's a lot of trees in town that block the view of some of these houses up in the hillside. I mean, where does it stop? What's next? You've got to look at the terrain, the earth, and if that's blocking the view of a house, do you have to take into consideration future grading or geological movement? Where does it stop? I mean, Los Gatos has never been a barren desert, and it never will be. Is that my time?
That's your time. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be some questions for you.
I do have a summary, but I'll wait.
Well, please stay up here. Yeah, and if you have a concluding statement you want to make, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay. In summary, Mr. and Mrs. Singh's proposed house meets the requirements of the hillside development standards and guidelines. The town's consulting architect has determined the house is well designed. His one minor recommendation has been incorporated. The plan for a two-story house has been approved by the subdivision. Mr. McCarthy has approved it. There is already one two-story house up there, and likely up to 3 of the 6 lots would qualify for a two-story, which would make it 50-50 mix. So, in conclusion, we respectfully request that the Planning Commission approve the two-story design of Mr. and Mrs. Singh's house.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll stay up here because there might be some questions. Before we get to questions, I want to get a show of hands to see everyone who's been able to visit the site, and if anyone has any additional disclosures to make at this time. All right, seeing none. Any questions for the applicant? None. All right. Well, we'll let the public speak, and then you'll have a chance to come back. So I have 3 speaker cards. If anyone wants to speak on this item, please get a card up to staff on either side of the dais here. First speaker is Mr. Will Pierce. Please introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Will Pearsall, and I am a... How's that? Better? Okay. My name is Will Pearsall, and I am a Los Gatos resident, and I'm a... Better? No?
Yep.
Okay. I'll start again. Thanks for giving me a chance to speak on behalf of Michael Singh. My name is Will Pearsall, and I'm a resident of Los Gatos, and I'm a fund manager for an investment firm. I've known Michael for the better part of 6 years, both professionally and personally. And on a professional level, I recognize Michael as one of the most innovative and dynamic leaders in the technology field today. As founder and chief executive of Monolithic Power, Michael's built one of the few remaining real growth stories in the analog semiconductor space. Amidst all the wild cyclical changes that are going on in the economics right now and the fierce competition from Asian competitors, Michael's company continues to grow, and it is thriving with his leadership and his vision. For this reason, my fund is an investor in the company, and I predict Monolithic will remain a dominant and enduring enterprise in the analog semiconductor space for the foreseeable future. Most importantly, and a key factor for our investment in Monolithic Power, is that we trust Michael. His integrity is beyond reproach. And in our business, in the financial business, that's one of the most key factors. You know, you might follow the news and you can see what's happening in the industry, and you see sometimes companies feel that they're unwilling to reveal bad news and tell investors the truth. Michael, we don't have that problem with Michael. He's a man of high integrity, and we never have an issue with him in his truthfulness. He's a very honest person and a man of upstanding character. And this kind of segues into my relationship with Michael on a personal level. When he commits to something, I know he'll follow through. When I've sought his personal help in researching investment ideas in the past, he's been generous in his time and thorough in his support. Moreover, from my experience in watching him build his business, I know when he decides to execute a plan, he's thought it through thoroughly and he's considered carefully the pros and cons. He's logical in his thinking, and he's economical in his execution, and considerate to those involved in helping him and cognizant of all the potential outcomes. For this reason, I feel strongly in recommending him, and would be proud to have him as a fellow resident here in Los Gatos. I think a person of this high caliber should be a welcome addition to this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearsall. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. The next card I have is for Citizen Ray.
You want me to add the, hey, 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 Citizen Ray? Or can I add it? Thank you. I want to tell you, I drove up there today. I wanted to see this new house that's under construction because I had played a big part, I believe, in when I gave testimony when that was approved by the Planning Commission. I wanted to see what the end product, the end game would look like. I went up there today, and here's this gorgeous one-story house spread out nicely on this large, flat lot. Beautiful. Seen from down below, seen from up the hill, seen from either side, seen from way up above. Gorgeous home. And I presume the other one that's been approved is the same. I don't remember it for some reason. But anyway, it all goes back to the hillside design guidelines. Are we going to follow them or aren't we? If we don't care about the mountain, the beauty, natural beauty of the mountain, just let Bud Lortz or his equivalent rubber stamp every application. Make it a done deal. Let the dollar bill crew win. And the people of Los Gatos lose. Okay? So, I want to tell you, this two-story home breaks the precedent of the guidelines and breaks the precedent of the approved gorgeous buildings that are going forward up there. Why would you want to approve this and ruin everything? And incidentally, Lot 5, McCarthy's home, was built many years ago. I believe it was the home for the guy running the girls' school up there, okay? No wonder it's two stories, because nobody gave a tinker's damn back then. So they use it as an example of what could be done and what should be done. It's false. A false, disingenuous, disgustingly dishonest allegation by this, whoever this man is. So anyway, do your thing, follow the rules, and keep Los Gatos, okay? If this man sees Los Gatos as a business opportunity, tell him maybe he should look elsewhere, okay? Los Gatos is not about the dollar bill. It's all about quality of life. The natural beauty of the mountain is to be preserved, and he doesn't give a tinker's damn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Next speaker is Noel Cross.
Yes, my name is Noel Cross. I'm the architect for the Brady's who live next door. The house is under construction, almost completed. He's traveling in New York on business right now, and so he wanted me to come and speak on his behalf. And he's in a tough position because when we were first hired, I came in right away and sat down and talked with Suzanne and Sandy and talked about the hillside guidelines. We had some story poles up as well, and we went down and met Sandy at the viewing platform, and we're told immediately that absolutely these sites, all four of these sites are visible, and that there was no chance at all of getting anything over the one-story, 18-foot height. And had this applicant met with the city even once before they started to design the house, they would have found this out. And so, we were told in no uncertain terms. I tried the same argument where we had our story poles up, and I took the photographs, and I tried to, and before I could finish my sentence, I was cut off in mid-sentence by the staff saying, no, it's not the total area, it's the width of the house. If 25% of the width of the house is visible, then that's what we're talking about. It's not if any trees are blocking the lower half or anything like that. It's the aggregate width of the exposed residence. So I would request that you apply these same rules to this application as well. I also have a little bit of an issue with the story poles. They didn't really illustrate the entire roof. There's probably, estimate 25% of the roof that's really not shown, especially on the second story facing on the Brady side. There's an octagonal second story room up there that's really not illustrated properly. And I think if they'd put story poles on every face of the roof, then the photographs from the valley floor would see quite a bit more of the actual, roof line. And like I'd like to say also, there's our house got designed and approved with the one-story guideline, the house on lot 6 as well. This is the tallest of the 4 lots. It's the highest, and will loom over the neighborhood. So not only do we request that you make the same findings that you made with respect to our project, and keep it to the same 18-foot height limit. But, this is also the highest one, and it's looking down into the other properties. So again, just to sum up, I request that you be consistent with the neighborhood,
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any questions? Thank you. Next speaker, Lee Quintana.
Hi, Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I'll just hold it. As most of you know, I was on the Planning Commission and on the Hillside and Architectural Standards Committee when the Hillside Standards were approved and when this project the PD came through. And I was delighted that the council made the determination that it should be consistent with the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines. Having said that, I think I need some clarification about the 2 lots. The house is being built on lot 3, and lot 4 remains as a separate lot, separate legal lot?
That is correct.
So in the future, lot 4 could be developed?
It could be, yes.
Okay. Following that line of reasoning, if there are still 2 legal parcels and the house is being built on lot 3, and it should be consistent with the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, I looked on the data sheet for some slope density, average slope information, so I could go back and look to see if that was consistent with the allowable maximum floor area, and I was not able to find that information. I think if the two lots are independently developable, that the house should be judged against the single lot that it's on, since there is potential for development of the other lot. Aside from that, to the question of the view, I mentioned two things, that the standards and guidelines in the vision, goals, and objectives do deal with visibility other than directly from the valley floor. In fact, Objective 4 says maintain natural appearance of the hillsides from all vantage points, including the valley floor. And the section on the visual analysis indicates that additional viewpoints can be established by the deciding body. Other than that, what I have to say is that it seems like, since all the other houses that have been approved have followed a certain form, that in fairness for the previously approved projects and consistency, that this one should be evaluated in the same way.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, our next speaker is Maurice Siamas.
Hello, I'm a Los Gatos resident. My name is Maurice Shamas, and I've known Michael Singh for a very long time. He started up a company very close to here, and I lived in Cupertino, and because he's moved it over close to Los Gatos, I've moved here to be in the same area, because I think his character is very, very strong, and I think he'd be a very welcome addition to Los Gatos itself. I've been to the property, and I've seen the houses around there, and I've seen that there was something greater than 18, the skyline they're talking about, 18 feet. So I've seen that there has been an exception made. Whether it's decided to be a little bit higher or it's not too big, there has been an exception. So I believe that his character and what he's done for the community, and he's given money to the charity fund in Christmas, to donate for the instead of Christmas party. He's donated money to the food bank. So I think his character is very, very good. And I don't believe that because the other houses who had some exceptions, and from the viewpoint, he should be penalized and not be able to get the house that he's asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Again, seeing none. Final card. So anyone else that wishes to speak besides the applicant, please get a card up. Mr. Tim Boyd.
Good evening. My name's Tim Boyd. I'm a town resident. I was here to talk about the next item on the agenda, but after hearing a little bit more about this, I felt compelled to speak. Full disclosure, I actually work with John Brady, I'm not sure which lot number, but the project that's been referenced, that's single story. I think granting a exception to do a second story on this project really creates a slippery slope. The other, I think the applicant's representative mentioned that the either two or other three projects, they were leaning towards getting second stories too. If that happens, where does it end? The hillside standards will be useless, and we're really looking towards you, the commission, to show us some guidance as to what is what's been approved, what's already been approved by other commissions before you, other commission members before you, and that's really what I have to say. I don't think some of the previous speakers have spoken about the applicant's character. I don't know the man, I can't speak to that, but I don't think a person's character should be a reason for the approval of a house that's going to potentially adversely affect the views of the hillside. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions? Seeing none. Any other member of the public wish to speak on this item? Last chance. All right. The applicant has 3 minutes to make closing statements or rebut. I have 3 cards for the applicant, so whoever wishes to speak on behalf is welcome to. Give it to staff over there and then put it on the overhead.
He doesn't have to. Don't say anything unless you're speaking into the microphone.
You can use the hand mic if you prefer.
I don't have the photo in there. The photo pictures that we took. Yeah, the photo. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. No, that's after that. Okay, we put the ammunition in there. Your pictures, the picture you made it.
Maybe you have to borrow.
Okay. Yeah, right. Hello, City. I use this one. Which one? Either one. Okay. I City Council. My name is Michael Shing. I'm the owner, and let me tell you how I bought the lot. And at the very beginning, when I look at the lot, and it's a flat lot and full of trees and in the mountains, and I really liked it. And then I talked to the owners, and the owner, and I told them the lot is only concern. The lot was very narrow. It's about only 100 feet wide, and it's a little more than that, I believe. So I had a concern with we building a very narrow house, and so I had to build a 2-story home. And I talked to the owner. The owner suggests me. It says it limit is 18 feet, and if you go over 18 feet, maximum is 25 feet. But you cannot expose for more tan 25%. So then I thought, oh, that's not a problem. So I never want to build a house. And like an eyesore. I don't like those houses. And you look at, I want to preserve the mountains. And also for my personal reasons, I believe in feng shui. So and I don't want to expose my house to other energy or bad energy coming or something. And I don't want to do that. So I never had a concern. And so I talked to the previous owners, and this is fine. Okay. So I did my own homework. And so here's the area. It's building a house. I took the pictures. Then we put the what do you call the orange tape? We put on there. I took the pictures, and it's very promising. And then we use the same size. We superimpose this house on it. And here. Here's the result. And gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to be have built a very visible house. I don't like myself. And so this is the result. I see it, and there's no way from the valley to see it because there's a very flat lot on the top. It's about 100 to 120 feet wide, very, very long. So I built the house very back of the lot. So in the valley floor, you can't really see it. So this is the picture I took from the viewing point.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Sorry, your time is up. Stay there. We'll see if we have any questions. Any questions from the commission? If not, I have one.
Okay.
The question was raised about the Lot 4 being developed at some point in the future, and someone in that side of the room indicated that that was not correct. So I just wanted to know if you wanted to clarify that issue of future development on Lot 4.
The Lot 4 is on the same as lot on my, no, this is part, no, I can't build a house. I will declare I will build the house on it. I will not build the house on it.
So you're not going to build, but you don't want to merge the lots and give up development rights to that lot?
If it's belong to mine, I will never build it. I will not build it. I don't know whether this is belong to mine or not. Okay.
But to staff, there's no part of this application that is merging or giving up development rights to that lot.
No, but I looked back at the PD, and the PD has 6 building sites approved, and the PD actually shows that entire area as one parcel. I don't know why there are 2 assessors parcels. They could be being assessed differently, but he is developing lot 3, and that's really all that's in question at this point.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing at this point, and it's now open for commission discussion, questions of staff, or a motion. Does anyone need any clarifications from staff at this point? Commissioner Talsfor.
Yeah, this has to do with condition 9 and condition 11 for landscaping, and 9 is for fencing, 11 is for landscaping. When the landscaping plan does come back for submittal, will the fencing be included in that?
That was our intention. We requested a landscape plan when we did the initial review of the plans, and that was something that we didn't get to, given that the issue of the 1-story versus 2 in the height was really the main question regarding the application. So depending upon what the commission's decision is on the application, if it was sent back to staff for some sort of redesign, we would require a landscape plan to be included before it came back. If it was a conditional approval, we would require the landscape plan to be done, reviewed, and approved before they came in for building permit. And that's how the condition is worded right now.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Matici.
Clarification, the hillside specification, as I recall it, states very clearly that houses cannot exceed 18 feet if they partially block the ridge line. Is that correct?
Yes, either there's more than one criteria. We definitely restrict them to 18 feet when they're on a ridge line. And then if you have a highly visible site, and there is some subjectivity to that. The Planning Commission does have the discretion to say a site is visible. If a site's visible, we do also restrict it to 18 feet. You may recall an application up on Cypress where the house was benched into this slope, and it was visible on one side, and that was held to 18 feet. So we have done it in other instances where the site's wide open and you see an elevation of the house.
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure I'd call this a ridge line, but it is clearly a high point.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners want to get us started here? Commissioner Jensen, thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in. I'll try a motion. My motion would be to continue this matter and with the direction to the applicant to redesign at the 18-foot height limit. I haven't heard rationale that supports exceeding it. I did look at it from the viewing platform. The story poles are clearly visible. The house next to it is at the 18-foot limit, and there seems to be enough room to redesign at an 18-foot limit. The town architect has indicated that that's possible. So I would not want to move to conditionally approve. I think there's enough issues that it should come back to the commission, so that's my motion.
Thank you. I have a motion. Commissioner Erickson, I saw your second. Commissioner Erickson, second. Do we have any commission discussion? Anyone want to make comments on the motion?
Other than to say
Commissioner Talasore?
Yeah, other than to say that I fully agree with the analysis in this report, and I think for the consistency of the neighborhood that's being built up there, that it is in the best interest of the town and of that neighborhood for us all to comply with the hillside design standards and guidelines for 18 feet. I don't see, there was not a compelling reason given to me of why there should be an exception.
Thank you, and I concur with the motion. I think not only from a visibility standpoint, but also from a neighborhood compatibility standpoint. I think this is the correct way to go. So seeing no further comment, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 6-0 with Commissioner O'Donnell recused. Appeal right?
There is no appeal because you've returned it to staff.
Oh, we're returning it to, yes. Okay. Do we need to do it to a date certain?
That would be advisable.
Okay.
Right now, I would give them, you might want to ask the applicant for some input on how much time they might need. I would say at least a month.
Could the applicant maybe give me a nod? Is a month enough time, or would you like longer? The motion is to send it back for redesign for a one-story, not to exceed 18 feet. So we're looking to continue this to a date certain, so we want to know how much time you feel you need. Okay, why don't we reopen the public hearing just for a second. If you'd come to the microphone real quick.
I don't think I can build a house in that narrow, and so I will study it, what to do.
So, is a month sufficient to study it and come back to us, or?
It's a month, yes, and a month is
a month is sufficient.
Is sufficient.
Okay. So, when's the next meeting that's open enough to accommodate this hearing?
April 22nd.
April 22nd. So do we need an additional motion now to make it at that date? Or?
Yes.
Make a motion to I'll make a motion to continue to April 22nd.
Moved and seconded by Commissioner Erickson. All in favor? Aye. Passes 6-0. Thank you.
And anyone following this application, there will be no additional notice of the hearing, a public hearing, which has been continued to April 22nd.
And at this time, if I could have your attention, since we do have commissioners coming in and a few commissioners leaving for the next item, we're going to take a 5-minute break to make that transition. Thank you.
Before we get into this, we'll have a staff report, but I want to point out to people, we have 15 speakers, which is great, but I do want to say to you that if, before you get up to speak, somebody has said, or some bodies have said repeatedly what you want to say, you might think of not repeating exactly the same thing. That's helpful. If you will have, those of you who will be responding to the applicant will have up to 3 minutes each. Sometimes we shorten that, but I won't shorten it. They'll have up to 3 minutes each. But again, anything you can do to expedite it by listening to the speaker before you would be appreciated by us, and ultimately it'll be appreciated by you because it'll get late. So that having been said, we'll go ahead and ask for a staff report.
And before we do, perhaps we should...
we have one desk item that I should mention, and that is a letter which came in today, or yesterday, March 10th, whatever date that is, yesterday from Santa Clara Development, and that was a letter in response to the earlier letter of Mr. Cunningham, which was dated March 8th. So there is that one desk item.
Please state for the record the reason.
Okay. Yes, and Mr. Korb will now explain to you why we're missing 4 commissioners.
3 commissioners. 3 commissioners. Fortunately, we do have 4, which is a quorum. As you can see, 3 commissioners have recused themselves. Commissioners Jensen and Vice Chair Bourgeois both live within 500 feet of the property, which is the subject of the application, and are thus required to recuse themselves under the Political Reform Act. Commissioner Talasfor doesn't have a financial conflict of interest. However, she does currently live in a home in a subdivision that was developed by the applicant. The applicant still owns property within that subdivision. She still has dealings with the applicant, and as a consequence felt it was most appropriate not to participate in this particular application.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
I did want to also note that the desk item, in addition to the letter from the applicant, there is a letter from a neighbor supporting the project. This project site is located on the southwest corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Caldwell Avenue. It's 2.6 acres. The site's occupied by the historic Thrash House, a house that was constructed around 1900. And there are 3 pre-1941 single-family homes that front on Caldwell Avenue, and a former convalescent hospital that consists of 3 buildings. The convalescent facility and 3 residences are proposed to be demolished and replaced by the proposed project, which includes 19 new homes, and the Thrash House will be retained. Some of the old additions will be taken off. The original house will be rehabilitated and some additions will be done, and the new garage added, a 3-car garage added on that site. From initial concept to the current plans, the project has been in the works since 2006. The project has gone through numerous plan iterations with a number of units being reduced. We started with 31 at the outset, and it is now 20, including the Thrash House. The project was initially considered by the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee in 2006. It was a 29-unit proposal at that point, and we did attach the CDAC comments to the staff report as Exhibit 6. The project was considered 3 different times by the Historic Preservation Committee. The committee considered the Thrash House renovation and approved that plan in December of 2008. There are 3 sets of minutes from the Historic Preservation Committee. Those are Exhibits 7, 8, and 9. The committee also recommended demolition of the 3 homes on Caldwell, and that was done in February of 2008. The committee did make some specific findings for the demolition of those homes, and that is outlined in their minutes. You have 3 different applications as part of this package. One is the plan development application, one is an architecture and site application, and then there is also a environmental review. The PD is a final decision by town council, so the planning commission will be making a recommendation to council on adoption of the plan development and on acceptance of the environmental document, which is a mitigated negative declaration. There's also a mitigation monitoring plan that goes along with that. And those three pieces will be forwarded to Town Council for final action with Commission recommendation. The application for architecture and site is required because the code has specific findings that need to be made for demolition of single-family homes, and those are included in your findings. The A&S application may be acted on by Planning Commission. Following approval of the PD, the next steps would be approval of a tentative map to actually subdivide the property into the ultimate lot configuration that's shown. And then architecture and site applications would be required for all the new homes and for the Thrash House renovation and expansion. As part of the PD, the property would be rezoned from R1D to RM 5 to 12. There are also two overlay zones. One is the LHP, which is Landmark Historic Preservation Overlay, and one is the PD, Plan Development. The reason we have an RM zoning on there versus the R1D was that the project originally had a higher density, which fell within that RM 5 to 12 range. With the underlying land use designation indicated by the general plan of medium density residential, either of these zoning designations works. When the project reduced to 20 units, we didn't change it to R1D. It could potentially be that, and it's not really relevant because a new ordinance will be adopted that will govern this property. But, so I think there was some question about why do we go with RM versus R1D. If you look at project density, with an R1D zone, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet for a single-family home. And if you applied that R1D zoning to this, you'd have 22 lots, potentially, or 22 homes. If you apply to the 8,000 square foot lot minimum, which is required for a duplex, they could potentially have 28 units. With the RM 5 to 12, the density range would be between 12 and 31 units. The proposed density is 7 units to the acre with exclusion of 2 affordable units, which is allowed by the housing element. If you fold those two in, the density is still under 8. It's about 7.7 for the entire site development. So we have 19 new residences, 17 are market rate units, 2 are affordable units below market price or BMP. You will also see BMR. That is not the correct designation. It is BMP. That is the term the town uses and what's in our town code. Those 2 units are shown. They're up on the corner of Caldwell and Los Gatos Boulevard. They are 2 separate units, but they're basically right up against each other to appear as one single home so that the size is compatible with the rest of the homes proposed within the project. There are 5 houses that front onto Caldwell. Currently, we have 3 houses and one of the convalescent facility buildings. That would be replaced by 5 homes fronting onto Caldwell, 3 fronting onto the boulevard, inclusive of the Thrash House and a new residence and the second BMP unit. And then the remainder are all accessed from a new private street that would come off Caldwell. Our unit sizes, with the exception of the Thrash House and the BMP units, range from 2434 to 3125 square feet. The BMP units are 1150 and 1250 square feet. Those are each 2-bedroom units, and they each have a single-car garage. All other units have a 2-car garage, and the Thrash House has a 3-car. Homes in the surrounding area are varying architectural styles, and we have a mix of 1- and 2-story homes. We did a number of technical reviews for this proposal: arborist review, architectural, geotechnical, traffic impact analysis, historical evaluation of the Thrash House. Specifically, we looked at the renovation plans to make sure that they qualified with the Secretary of Interior's standards and determined that that is the case. There were 2 little minor recommendations that were attached to that last review, and those are included in the PD ordinance and as mitigation measures for the project. There was also an environmental review done, and you have a proposed mitigated negative declaration in front of you this evening. We did do a 30-day review on that because we sent it through the State Clearinghouse. State Clearinghouse has cleared it as of March 6th and did not have any comments from any state agencies. The town also sent it directly to the State Office of Historic Preservation, given that we had an historic house involved with the proposal. Main issues with the project, things that we've heard from people out in the neighborhood, are traffic, size, bulk, and mass of the proposed residences, density, Location of the BMP units, I did have one person that was concerned about locating those right up on the corner like that. And I wanted to specifically mention on traffic, we do have a town engineer here this evening that can answer questions about the traffic policy. And we have our consultant, TJKM. This is a town consultant that prepared our traffic analysis that was folded into our environmental review. So they're both available if you have any specific questions about traffic. Generally, the traffic policy of the town is such that we give credit for the previous use of the site. And based upon that trip credit for a convalescent hospital versus the proposed residential use, we actually have a net decrease in trips. So we don't have a traffic impact based on the town policy and how it's applied. The consultant also looked at safety, circulation, where driveways and street were going to be located. So there were a number of, did some trip counts. There were a number of things that took place as part of that traffic analysis. There are several exceptions to the town code that are being proposed. This is possible under APD. Those are the height of the homes on the Plan 1 is 31 feet. 30 feet is our normal maximum by code, but if the commission feels it's appropriate to allow that 31 height maximum, it is written into the PD ordinance right now. That is one exception, and then they have some building setback reductions. There's some garages that are only 2 feet from the property line, and there are some there are reduced setbacks for some of the homes. So that concludes staff's report. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Sayoc?
Thank you, Ms. Davis, for your report. You mentioned the traffic studies and that we do have engineers available to explain that. I would like that further explained. I'm just having a little bit of trouble grappling how we came up with a net decrease with a 20-unit home and how that only comes up with 15 a.m. peak hours in particular. So if someone could just walk me through that.
I'm going to suggest that before we do that, and it is a suggestion, that we listen to everything, and then you may have additional questions. But that way we'll only bring the experts up once, if that's okay with you. All right, thank you. Are there other comments or questions? If not, I think we can hear from the applicant now. So the applicant will have 5 minutes, and then we'll listen to others, and then we'll have the closing from the applicant. And again, would you state your name? And
for the record, my name is Mark Robeson. My address is 2185 The Alameda, San Jose. Thank you, members of the commission and town staff, for your report. As staff mentioned, we've been involved in the entitlement of this property for the past 3 years, but my thinking and involvement in this property goes well before that. We developed a property at the corner of Blossom Hill and Roberts Road about 12 years ago, and for several years when I lived in that development, I drove by, I ran by this property almost daily, and always hoped that the opportunity, if it arose, to do something with this building, that I'd have a chance to be involved in it. When you look at the building and you look at the possibilities of what we're proposing, it's intriguing, and not from just this old house standpoint, although doing historic renovations are interesting, and we've done several of them. The possibility here is that is much more than just the structure itself. Along this street, you've got a lot of old mansions that were part of the history and a part of the history of this town, and hearken to a bygone era when it wasn't called Los Gatos Road, it was Los Gatos San Jose Road, and it led into San Jose. And these old mansions are unique and rare. You don't have them in every town. Cupertino, Santa Clara, Sunnyvale. None of those towns have anything like this. Even if you go over to Winchester, it's an entirely different character than what you have on this street. And you only have to go a couple of blocks up on Los Gatos Boulevard, and it's a different character. And this is the character that is part of this neighborhood. And by eliminating what's here, you have a chance to unify the neighborhood and restore the very character that this house embodies. And you can see the existing condition is blighted. I brought in an aerial. Unfortunately, because of the way we've got this set up, it's difficult to show this to everybody. But for the benefit of the commission, this is the Thrash House here. This is the hospital right here, a portion of it that you see over here. And you can see that there's a very large hospital building in the rear, and here are the three older homes. And when you look at the scale of this, when I showed it to my kids last night, they asked if it was the high school. I mean, it's so big and out of scale that I think that it's completely incompatible with the use that's there. And as I mentioned, the possibilities go, much beyond, even what happens on Los Gatos Boulevard. As you notice, there's be careful here, there's that lower rock wall wraps around Los Gatos Boulevard and out to and around Codwell. Where Codwell is going to be, the old homes and the hospital building that's out there is going to be removed too, and it's going to be replaced with new homes that look like this. It's out along Codwell. We have the same lotting pattern, same lot size, same setback, large porches, detached garages. We're using a early California architectural style and craftsman architecture, which will be, which is reminiscent of some of the best streets here in town. This particular rendering shows the project from, I can show you from the aerial from back here, looking this way, and you might be able to see the Thrash House and the palms up here. And so it creates a visual connection, not only from outside the project, you see the Thrash House, but also inside. And there's a nice connection, and there you can see the porches, you can see the variety of materials. We're also using basements. We've taken the garages and either completely detached them, or we've put them to the rear of the properties, and at a minimum we've recessed them. And so the garages, are de-emphasized here, which is consistent with the character that you have in the neighborhood and throughout the town. As staff mentioned, this has been a long process, and we've been at it for 3 years, and it has been thoroughly vetted. And staff mentioned, the several meetings that we had. But in addition to that, there was, in addition to their own professional judgment, they hired outside consultants, a traffic engineer, an arborist, geologist, archaeologists, historians, and all kinds of people to look at what we're doing here, and to make sure that it works.
Can you wind up with your time?
Sure.
Is over.
I'd like to conclude by saying that the vast majority of people who we've met with over the last 3 years agree that this is going to be improving the Thrash House and taking out the hospital is going to improve the condition in the neighborhood and will improve property values there. The one main issue, as staff mentioned, is traffic, and to add some perspective.
Let me stop you. Really, when I say you should wind up, if you don't wind up quickly, I'm going to have this problem 15 or 16 times.
All right.
I really want you to finish.
All right. Well, what I would say is that from a traffic perspective, putting homes in walking distance.
I still don't think you understand.
All right.
You have about one sentence left. Okay. Choose it wisely and finish.
Thank you. I respectfully request that you support the staff recommendation to the council to support this project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we will be hearing, we may have questions of you right now.
Okay.
And we will hear you again. So I'm not trying to be rude to you, but that is the way we proceed. Now, are there questions of the speaker? Commissioner Matici?
Related to staff's report that a couple with 2 homes are over 31 feet, I think you said?
There's 5.
It's the Plan 1 is what it is. There's a plan, there's a number of plan iterations.
Explain why they have to be over the 30 feet.
It's because of the architectural character of those particular plans, and it's 1 foot higher than the other plans. The height of the other plans is 26 feet. So there's some real variation in the roof lines within the subdivision.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. And now we will start with people who have filled out cards. There's no particular order, they're just the way they are here. The first speaker I have listed is, I believe it's Peter McMorrow. And when you come up, if you would, again, give us your name and address for the record, it would be helpful.
My name is Peter McMorrow. I live at 298 Albert Drive in Los Gatos. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for a long time, and I'm also the consulting civil engineer for Santa Clara Development on this project. I'm here to ask that you approve this project for two reasons. One of them is probably a little bit on the selfish side, is that it would provide employment opportunities for my company and also the construction industry, which we need at this moment. But also I think that this project will be an asset to the community because it will clean up a corner of Los Gatos Boulevard that needs to be cleaned up, and it will restore the Thrash House. My company has worked for Santa Clara Development as a consulting civil engineer since 1985. During that time, it has given me the opportunity to see how they do business, and the thing that I think always separates their company from other development companies that we work for is their attention to detail. And I think that this attention to detail has made their past projects successful and will also make this a successful project.
Thank you. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you again. The next speaker would be Pamela Warren.
Thank you. Whoops. My name is Pamela Warren. I live at 105 Filmer, which is, you can see.
You can take the mic with you, and then we can hear you.
That's what the project is. That's one thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so I live at 105 Filmer. I've been to a couple of the neighborhood meetings for this project. I've signed the list to be notified in each meeting, and I've always found out about this, not by being notified by the developer, unfortunately, but by the newspaper. But point I wanted to make is, I've done a little bit of homework on my neighborhood.
For 1 second, and this will be for everybody, and shouldn't take away from your time. They record this, and if you don't speak into the mic or take the mic out and carry it with you, then you're missing that opportunity.
Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what I've done is gone through using the Santa Clara County Assessor's website and done just a little character information on our neighborhood. And what I've shown is the house size on the top line and the lot size on the bottom. So as you can see, on Caldwell, most of the lots are about 5,500 square feet. But you can see the house sizes are like 700 square feet, 900 square feet. On the corner, there's one that's 1,100 square feet. On Bella Vista Court, I've just shown the house sizes. I feel that this project isn't really in keeping with the neighborhood fabric. I'd like to see the geometry be the same, which means you would have maybe 10 houses on that site, not 19 or 20. I'd like to see our neighborhood preserved. I'd like to see the traffic mitigated. I think it's way too dense. This 20 houses is a lot of houses at 5,000. A 5,000 square foot lot with a 3,000 square foot house does not occur in our neighborhood. That's just a really different animal. The setbacks are very concerning. A 2-foot setback, a firefighter with a self-breathing apparatus cannot get around and fight a fire behind there. That to me is a very dangerous situation, and it wouldn't be something I'd want in my very backyard. My most important point to make to you is just to maintain the character of our neighborhood. Everybody's totally free to do whatever they want with their property and keeping with everybody's rules and everybody's guidelines. Of course, the property should be developed, but I just think the character of this is just, it's too tall, it's too dense, it's overwhelming, it's crowded, It's going to put an awful lot of traffic. Drop a couple houses out, give us some open space. Where are these kids going to play? I mean, on those tiny little lots. If the developer wants to develop in the neighborhood, we should do it as a give and take. Give us something back. A basketball court, some open space, something just back to the neighborhood that we can all be in agreement with and be happy with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just 1 second. Are there any questions? Thank you again. The next speaker we have is Tim Boyd.
Good evening. My name is Tim Boyd. Nice to talk to you again. I live at 101 Bella Vista Court. I had let me just start off. I had the opposite experience with Mark and his company that he called me up last week and asked to come and speak to me and present the proposal, and he was open to having some neighbors come by, and I think he was a little bit overwhelmed on Sunday afternoon when there were 15 people in my living room. So I appreciate that. I am, however, concerned about the traffic impacts. The previous speakers talked about the setbacks, which I have some concerns with as well. But on Bella Vista Avenue, Bella Vista Avenue gets a lot of traffic in kind of peak hours. I'm kind of surprised by the findings of the traffic survey that was done that don't support that this project would increase traffic, when I don't think there are many drivers in the convalescent home other than the staff, other than the employee members who I often saw them being dropped off or come on bus when the project was open. With the misalignment of Kennedy and Caldwell, that drivers making a right turn from Los Gatos Boulevard onto Caldwell swing out, and there's not a lot of room. It's probably once a week I almost get sideswiped by someone swinging wide when they turn right. So I think there's a big concern there. Bella Vista Avenue, we've started a traffic calming petition to address some of those issues, but we're item 5 on the list, and who knows how long that's going to take to be addressed. I really think that the town should take that into consideration. Additionally, one of the issues brought about on the light there, we talked about the misalignment. I talked about the misalignment, but the light, whenever there are kids walking to school in the morning, anybody coming off Caldwell to turn left or right basically has to wait through at least a couple cycles to get out if there's any pedestrians trying to walk. The lights need to be retimed to address that, or something needs to, I don't know if there's a possibility of creating a dedicated right-hand turn lane there. Additionally, one of the concerns I had is about the parking. The staff report mentioned that there were 16 guest spaces. Only 10 of the guest spaces are on the new private court. I'm not sure where the 6 spaces are on Caldwell, but if they're counting on parking all the way up to Los Gatos Boulevard, that's really going to cut down on the visibility of people turning right onto Caldwell. So I'd appreciate if the staff or the commission members take that all into consideration when they review this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. The next speaker would be Matt Kevorkian.
No relation.
I thought I'd get that out of the way first. Full disclosure, I'm Matt Kevorkian, and I live at 17375 High Street, and my wife and I are good friends of Mr. Robeson and his wife. And full disclosure, I also have a lot of friends sitting out in this audience here, and when I leave, it's going to remain that way. I've lived here for 25 years. And I've driven by the eyesore on the corner of Caldwell and Los Gatos Boulevard for 25 years. My kids went to Van Meter. My last one's still at Fisher. I've driven back and forth. And You know, no offense to the engineers with the traffic, but, you know, 20 more cars or 30 more cars, it's not going to matter to me. There's cars on that road all the time. I live on High Street. I come down High Street, which is Loma Alta to Los Gatos Boulevard. I turn right. I try to get on the freeway. It takes me 3 lights to get through that left-hand turn lane to get on to Highway 9 to get on the freeway. The reality is there's cars in Los Gatos, and 40 more cars or whatever the number is isn't going to matter. When Mark bought this lot 3 or whatever years ago, my first reaction was great. You know, it's an eyesore. He'll fix the house up, and, you know, the rest of the houses will be nice. I've seen the work that they do. I think they do great work. So as a friend, neighbor, and friends of other neighbors, I'm here to support the project.
Thank you. Are there questions? Thank you again. Karen Heaton?
Hi, I'm Karen Heaton. I'm a resident. I live at 218 Caldwell Avenue, and I've been a resident there for over 21 years. And I'm here to speak in total support of this development. I've been wishing for 21 years that somebody would do something with that convalescent hospital. I really can't see how traffic would be really that negatively impacted at all. I've lived with trucks and deliveries and people coming and going from the convalescent hospital from day one. I've lived with the mess they've created. I've lived with their non-responsive attitude to the general blight that took place even before they vacated. I just really believe that this will do nothing but add value to the town, to the neighborhood. Our property values will go up. Our usable lot space on my side of Caldwell Avenue is 5,000 square feet. And I don't think the lot sizes presented in this plan are too small. It seems like a totally reasonable number of homes to me, and I really look forward to the development of that property and the rehabbing of the Thrash House. Thank you.
Just 1 second. Are there any questions? Thank you again. Citizen Ray?
Yes. First off, I don't live there, okay? But as you know, the public interest of Los Gatos is a hobby of mine, okay? I come down here regularly to give you 2 cents worth. And my 2 cents worth today has grown to a nickel's worth, okay? The developers never seem to learn what the general plan means, the view of the future, and the fact that Los Gatos has a street grid laid out 130 years ago. And every new development, these people come up and speak as if it's the last development that's going to happen. Give me a break. Give me a break. Okay? The incremental damage to the congestion and the quality of life, as if each one of these applications was approved, would be unbelievable. And these people don't seem to care, some of them. Okay? Ugly. Ugly as sin. Next, the letter from Mr. Cunningham. Beautiful. A real dissertation on land use, values, and the vision of the future for Los Gatos expressed by the general plan. I can't say anything to improve on that, except he left out one item. You left out the infill policy of Los Gatos, adopted by the town council some 10 years ago. Let me read it to you. Infill projects should contribute to the further development of the surrounding neighborhood, i.e. improve circulation, contribute to or provide neighborhood unity, eliminate a blighted area, and not detract from the existing quality of life. Number 2, an infill project should be designed in context with the neighborhood and surrounding zoning with respect to the existing scale and character of surrounding structures. Provide comparable lot sizes and open space. Consider garage placement, setbacks, density. Provide adequate circulation and on-street parking. Infill development should blend, repeat, blend rather than compete with the established character of the area. Okay? And some say that this is not an infill policy, doesn't apply because it's not new development. Well, give me a break. You take the old buildings off, and what do you have? New development, brand new development. So anybody who says contrary is nothing but nonsense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Ducharme.
My name is Paul Ducharme. I live at 222 Caldwell Avenue. So my wife and my family and I live absolutely right across the street from the convalescent home. We've lived there for 3.5 years. I have to tell you, we came here from New York, and to introduce my 85-year-old father-in-law to my new home and to have him look across the street and see a convalescent home and say, can you help me to understand what that is? And is that the way you afforded Los Gatos? And the answer is, yeah. We afforded Los Gatos, and we afforded that home because the convalescent home brought the property value down to a point where we could actually afford to live there. We have looked forward for 3.5 years to somebody saying they're going to do something about this. My wife has a new job for the town of Los Gatos. She's able to call the community service officer every time one of the windows in the Thrash House is open, because people are either living there, doing drugs there, or trying to do something in that house. So she looks every day for the windows, and then she calls and says, the window's open again. And they're great. They come over and they say, we're going to clear it out, and they do it again. But we've lived across this concept of urban blight for 3.5 years. I have a son at Cal Poly. He never knew what it was to live in a house and feel like he could sit on his front porch and feel proud of what he was looking at. His friends would come over. They all live they're out to high school, obviously. But there's never been a time when we've had neighbors, when we've had family, when we have friends over, where we felt anything other than embarrassed about what it was to live there. Because their houses across the street are boarded up. And they put the big fences around, but they used to put graffiti on them. And it's urban blight at its finest, and I drive around Los Gatos, and I'm blown away by the fact that no other place in Los Gatos looks like this. So with all due respect to my friends who live on Filmer or who live on Bella Vista, my invitation is come spend a week at our house, sit on our porch for a week, and look at what we see for any period of time, and I will promise you, you will be here saying, please do something about this convalescent home. Now, in reality, I wish they would make it into a park. I would love that. I would love it to be green and lush, and we could take walks. But there's no profit motivation that's going to do that, and it's not going to increase the tax base, and nobody's going to want to do that. And believe me, I've asked Los Gatos, would you please buy it and turn it into a park? And we know that's not going to happen. And so there's a developer who's come in, and is it a perfect plan? I have no idea. It seems like it's thoughtful. It seems like they genuinely care. It seems like they're answering a lot of questions, and my goodness, they've taken a long enough time to figure it out. We see the people from the town come over, and it seems like you're being very responsible about trying to assure that you think about all the different things. I just wish you were there 30 years ago, because if you were, my guess is they never would have put a convalescent home there in the first place. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Next speaker is Leo Cunningham. We should indicate what we're receiving. We're receiving a multi-page document which is captioned "Handouts in Support of Leo Cunningham's Remarks in Opposition to 371 Los Gatos Boulevard." It's dated March 11th. Thank you very much. And if everybody has a copy, you can start at your convenience.
Thank you. I'm Leo Cunningham. I live at 400 Bella Vista, which is the corner of Bella Vista and Caldwell. I submitted a letter on dated March 8th. You got it on March 9th. I think it's Exhibit 13 to the items received from staff. I've also given a handout, and I'm going to walk through some of it. I invite you to peruse the rest of it. Some of it's self-evident. If I could direct your attention first to tab A. That's a photograph of Bella Vista and Caldwell. And the point of this photo is to show you that Bella Vista and Caldwell are extremely narrow streets. Bella Vista is lacking sidewalks. Caldwell does have sidewalks. They're heavily used by pedestrians, cyclists, and skateboards. The point of all this is they are immensely sensitive to any increase in traffic. And if you can't figure out where I'm going, I'm opposing this project because of the increase in traffic it will cause, in no small part because of its density, because it's destroying 3 houses that shouldn't be demolished, and because of the way the project is configured, dumping the occupants, the drivers from the 14 houses that are part of the infill onto Caldwell is a mistake. Unavoidable the way this has been conceptualized, but it's a mistake. So if I could kind of race through this, I'd like to put in context what is really going on with respect to this development. And so I would flip you ahead to tab E, which I think is the relevant map for what you should consider when you consider this potential development. The fact is that it sits directly at ground zero of a corridor that runs between Los Gatos High School and Fisher Junior High School or Middle School, Louise Van Meter, the Cavalry Church. People use Los Gatos Boulevard, but then they also divert to Caldwell and Bella Vista to avoid the problematic traffic that exists on Los Gatos Boulevard. If I can flip you to the next page, which is tab F, that illustrates just how the site is situated. And what it shows you is that you've got all those units having to dump out onto Caldwell. Caldwell is not a major artery. Caldwell is not even a so-called neighborhood collector, as I understand it under the traffic lingo. It's a street that's too narrow as it is, no parking on one side, and people park on the sidewalk on the other side because it's so narrow. So it can't handle any increased traffic. If I could flip you ahead to what really are photographs, tabs G, tabs H, what you're going to see is what Los Gatos Boulevard really looks like. I suspect that Mr. Robeson, who really seems like a lovely man, I suspect the reason he would run by this property was because he couldn't drive by it on any given day. That would take too long. His photographs don't show cars, but that really is a big problem, not just for the neighbors on Bella Vista and Caldwell, but for everyone in the town. And if you consider one of the notes we made on the map that is tab E, there's going to be future development on Los Gatos Boulevard. There is a fiction indulged in by the traffic engineers regarding what we compare to when. The fact of the matter is there's too much traffic now. This will increase it, and we're going to have further traffic in a matter of no time. I have a number of other points I would make about the demolition if anyone would like to ask me about it, and I believe I can sense what was in the item, today's desk item, that I did not receive a copy of. That may have responded to my letter. If anyone wants to ask me about that, I'd be delighted to respond to that.
Are there questions? Let me just say, we have all, I believe, read your letter, and we appreciate it. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to study this yet. We appreciate you taking us through it. And if you need a copy, I think you just got a copy of the letter we received today. So I'm sorry we can't give you more time, but we appreciate all the efforts you put into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question here, Tom. Oh, there is a question. I'm sorry. Commissioner Sayak has a question.
Actually, I do have your thought. I would like to hear your thoughts on the demolition of the 3 bungalows.
Right. So if you were to look at my presentation, and actually I believe Ms. Heaton lives in one of the homes that I depicted, that is at tab M. And what it shows is the potential for the bungalow-style houses. And if you move from M on to, I'm sorry, I'm saying M, but I really mean J. I think Ms. Heaton lives in 218, she said, which is a beautiful home. And for my untrained eye, it's not so different from one of the 2 bungalows that's depicted at K that's earmarked for demolition. And this body can't simply defer to what the Historic Preservation Committee did. We don't know the evidence on which they reached their conclusions, and you all have to make separate findings. And I haven't heard any of the facts that would support demolishing these structures, which were inhabited up until very recently, but then we've had a blight situation, really, of unoccupied dwellings in the convalescent hospital since the property was acquired.
And we have another question. Commissioner Mashichi.
The Historical Committee originally wanted the 3 homes saved at meetings back in 2007. As time progressed, structural reports were given that stated they were structurally unsound and approved the demolition. Do you have evidence contrary to that?
No, I don't have that, and quite frankly, it was a genuine mystery to me what had happened.
Yeah, that was the evolution. They originally were requested saving the 3. As time went on, they deteriorated more. Structural reports came in, and they voted to have them demolished.
So I thought it might have been that one of you, Commissioner Machichi, was president at one, and Commissioner Sayak was president at the other, but you were never there together to think
No,
about
I read the minutes of the previous one when they asked for it to be saved. I was there for the one where the structural report asked it to be demolished.
Respectfully, as a matter of process, I
Let me stop this right away. I appreciate both of your positions, but I don't think we want to have a back and forth on this. Thank you.
I just want to know what his evidence was.
Right.
I'm commenting on the absence of evidence.
I understand what you're saying. All right. There are no further questions to that speaker. We have Jenny Fountain.
Hi, my name is Jenny Fountain. I live at 218 Caldwell. My husband and I moved in about 1.5 years ago, so we were not living here when the convalescence hospital was in operation. I think it had just been purchased recently after we bought our house, or recently before we bought our house. And Karen was the real estate agent that sold us our house, and she had let us know that there was going to be a project coming. We were excited about that. And generally, overall, do support a project here. And Mr. Robinson came to our home on Monday and showed us all the plans. And generally, I think everything looks really good. I do have concerns about the traffic, which I'm not going to reiterate because everyone has already raised those. My only extra to add to that is there's a lot of foot traffic on this street on Caldwell and Bella Vista, and there's severe, with so many new cars being added, I do have concerns about that. I also have concerns about there being 5 or 6 new entrances to those homes from Caldwell, which I think will cause concern for the neighbors in the neighborhood.
Thank you. Just 1 second. Are there any questions? Thank you again. Peter Sharrock.
Good evening. My name is Peter Sharrock, and I live at 349 Los Gatos Boulevard. I've been living there for 15 years and a resident of the town for 18 years. I have 2 or 3 points. The first is, ever since I moved to Los Gatos, the Thrash House and the surrounding buildings have been a blot on the landscape, and I think that's a point of shame for all of us who live here in the town. And I think it's a terrific opportunity we have to have that cleaned up. Second point I have is that I'm not living on the boulevard with a lot of traffic out there. I'm not too worried about the traffic, and I was conscious when the convalescent home was there that there was a fair degree of toing and froing of staff members and visitors. So my perception is, or my guess is, that the analysis by the traffic engineer is probably correct. That there's probably going to be less traffic with this development than there was when the convalescent home was in full swing. Los Gatos as a town is an eclectic sort of place with little houses, medium-sized houses, big houses. The development that I saw originally in the plans that were displayed over a year ago were for many more houses and a considerable number of smaller houses, and I thought that plan fitted rather nicely with the overall, not necessarily the specific neighborhood, but with the overall philosophy of the town, or the character of the town, being one that has little houses, medium-sized houses, and big houses. So I was very happy with that plan. I'm a little bit less happy with the more recent plan with fewer houses, because it seems that the smaller houses have been mostly gotten rid of, and there are still, I think, a couple of affordable homes still there, but I would have liked to see rather more of that. Thank you very much.
Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ali Quintana?
The perils of being short. Okay, I'm going to go. First thing I'm going to do is just indicate that I've passed out to the commission a number of handouts that are information. Whoops, forget this one. That's not this copy. Handouts that I found in the file that I thought were pertinent information for the commission to have to make a decision. If I have time, I will speak to each individual one, but I doubt that I will have time. But I did want to point out that this is the Sanborn map from 1929. This is the Thrash House right here, and this is God, this is strange. Pointing at it. This shows Caldwell and the rotting pattern there. That's the historic rotting pattern. And I want to back up and say that the good thing about this project is the restoration of the Thrash House. But I think that it can be done in a more sensitive manner to maintain the character of the existing neighborhood. Caldwell is one of the few streets left in this town that really is a throwback to the history of smaller cottages and bungalows. And based on this, I think it would be possible to maintain that rotting pattern along Los Gatos Boulevard and Caldwell, and then have some other inside. Also maintaining the size of the cottages and the variety of architecture, which the current plan doesn't do. Also, sorry. Questions regarding the negative declaration. They fall into many categories. most of the issues that people have brought up tonight are actually environmental issues that should be covered in the environmental document. One of the things with traffic is the SEQA requires that the baseline be the existing condition. The existing condition today is without the convalescent hospital, and I believe the town has more current figures than the 2006 figures that we used. Also, there's no long-time cumulative added for subsequent years. There's generally a figure, a certain percent thrown in. I'm going to be out of time, so I have questions about the size and scale of the studio, what that means, the basements, the height of the attics, do they qualify for countable space? They were not included in the sizes of the house.
Thank you. Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Oh, there is a question. Commissioner Sayak.
Actually, something just caught my eye on your sheet right there. Land use planning, general plan conformance. Could you just
Thank you.
explain the blurb?
I'll explain two things there. The notice that went out for the negative declaration was with the change from R1D and, all the other stuff to RM 5 to 12 PDL historic. The negative declaration itself actually addressed the R1D. And the question about the general plan conformance is based on the differential between what does density mean and what does intensity mean. The negative declaration in explaining the general plan policies, which a lot of refer to intensity of development rather than the density of development, were answered in terms of the density. The intensity of this project is very, very high. How many of the parcels don't meet the setback requirements? How many of the parcels have either the main house or the studio over the allowed height limit? That kind of thing. That's intensity. The density may be okay, but the configuration makes for tiny little lots with huge houses. And that's what I mean about the general plan conformance. But also, I think this, I'll just say this because it relates back to the comment that it really doesn't matter whether it's RM or the downtown residential. And of course, in my usual fashion, I can't find my piece of paper, so I'm going to paraphrase. The handout from the town on downtown residential indicates that the reason for it is to preserve existing historic structures and neighborhoods. I think this is a historic neighborhood, and it was not evaluated by any historic evaluation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Next speaker card I have is Larry. I think I'm having trouble reading it. It looks like Noon, perhaps?
My name's Larry Noon. I live at 40 Fillmore, about 7 or 8 houses down the street from Los Gatos Boulevard. I'm very much in favor of having Los Gatos Boulevard resurrected to its past. I've spoken to, actually I have 5 letters from my neighbors saying they will support the project. The idea that you leave a piece of property in disarray and derelict for this long is ridiculous. I hope the commission will take these letters into account and realize that the people closest, actually these are all the houses closest to Los Gatos Boulevard, and none of them want to see the project go away. They want it done. So.
You're going to give us the letters, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there questions of the speaker?
And those are the only people I even talked to. So I would suspect that if I talked to people along the street, other people, a lot of them would be in favor too.
Thank you very much. Bill Davis?
Pretty common, huh? My name is Bill Davis, and I live on the corner of Caldwell and Los Gatos Boulevard, right next to the project. And I'm all for developing that site. It obviously needs to be done, but I just want to make sure it's done in a good manner. And Mark spoke real eloquently about the mansions along Los Gatos Boulevard, and there's history and a lot of beautiful houses along Los Gatos Boulevard, and I couldn't understand why the BMP units were put right in the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Caldwell, right in the most visible location it could possibly be. And on a selfish note, House 19, which is also on Los Gatos Boulevard, the only way to access that is Caldwell also, and as a result, there's 3 driveways that face my driveway, and that's an issue to me. And when I look at this project, it looks like density to me. One way in, one way out, and get as many houses as you can on that property. It seems to me there should be access on and off Los Gatos Boulevard. So I just think, there's 109 parking spots, so that's a lot of cars to drop on Caldwell. This is a very skinny street. You can only park on one side. You can't park on our side of the street. And so I just think that's a real issue. And I just think it's too many houses.
Questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. Mary Patterson?
Good evening. I'm Mary Patterson. I live at 119 Vista del Campo, which is at the end of Filmer. So I come out Filmer every day, all day, into a tremendous amount of traffic, which I can't imagine adding even 40 cars to. It's so bad. But my main concern is, number one, I was very disappointed that also I was not notified of anything going on with this development, and we have gone to every meeting and specifically requested that our name and our neighborhood be notified because we are so close. And I feel like it's kind of like this presentation tonight. We saw the back of the signs and nobody made any effort to turn it around to show any of us that they're trying to do something because they know we don't agree with it. So I just want to tell you that I'm sad because I have lived in Los Gatos for over 20 years and I see a very lovely town being turned into Summerhill Hill home development, piece by piece. And these homes, all of us would like to see that area fixed because it is an eyesore, but to put 19 homes, great big huge 19 homes there in a neighborhood where they're one-story homes and older homes, is just going to be overwhelming to look at on Los Gatos Boulevard. So please remember that this is a very visible space. We're all going to see it, everybody that drives by there, and it will add traffic to a very bad situation because when the schools come out, you just cannot move. From school time to the time people come home from work, it is a parking lot. So please give it some serious thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I might also, just so the record can establish, I assume all of us have constantly seen the site, viewed the site, quite familiar with it, so the record should reflect that. The next card I have is for Brian, I think it's Galley.
Hi, my name is Brian Galley. I live at 346 Bella Vista. My property doesn't actually border on this, but clearly I use Caldwell and Los Gatos Boulevard. I think from my point of view, is this project perfect? I don't know. You've heard some people say it should be more dense, some people who say it should be less dense. My personal preference would be for a lower density. But I think the main point I wanted to bring up is Caldwell. I met with the developer on Sunday at Tim's house, and he mentioned that the frontage of this project that borders on Caldwell Avenue would be widened, that there'd be sort of a pull out on the side. I don't remember exactly how much wider the street would be, 8 feet. I think that would be a mistake. I think that would only increase the speed of the traffic on Caldwell. And I think since it wouldn't be fully widened, only about half of it, that it would really destroy the street in general.
All right. Questions? Thank you. Sal Caruso.
Thank you, Honorable Commission. My name is Sal Caruso. I am the project architect for the Thrash House and have worked here in Los Gatos on numerous projects, including the Los Gatos Opera House that we resurrected after the Loma Prieta earthquake. I wanted to speak to a couple of matters. Most specifically, I think the BMP units at the corner is absolutely most appropriate. I don't feel that it is appropriate to hide and or shove in a back corner a BMP unit because it is of inferior cost or whatever it might imply. I think when architecturally appropriately designed, it belongs right there at the forefront with everyone else, right along Los Gatos Boulevard with the other mansions, both historic and new. The issue of neighborhood. Along the side street, the architectural pattern of the lots is exactly matching the Sanborn maps. So to avoid confusion, let's be very clear that the historic pattern and rhythm of the lot sizes along Caldwell is indeed that which is going back to 1928 that was brought up. So that's an important point because from a historical standpoint, we have great diversity in heights, we have great diversity in setbacks. Modern PDs and modern setbacks don't allow for that intricacy and attention to detail. That's why this project actually responds to that. Many of the houses in this existing neighborhood have 2-foot setbacks and or built on property line. That is the character of the old neighborhoods. They're not built at 5-foot setbacks for the garages. So I think actually going back to a smarter use of our land is prudent. We're not making any more land. For years, I have been before this body, 25 years. And in that 25 years, I've heard repeatedly, let's build smarter. Smaller lot sizes, and smaller homes. These are not the 5,000 square foot homes that we commonly see. And this is something wonderful for the neighborhood. Interesting in hearing it from the audience, the neighbors that are directly adjacent to the property and directly across the street are the ones in support. Mostly it's the folks that live a block, 2-3 blocks away that are ones that are opposed. So it's an interesting dynamic if you really think about it. The ones that are really there and living it and breathing it are supporting the project. So I really urge you to support the project. The style and character and the diversity of height is critical. The proposed project has sweeping roof lines. They go from 26 foot to 31 foot. 1 foot, you will not even notice the difference in height. If you look at that architecture behind you, it's beautiful, it's quaint, it's charming. The part that you'll be seeing from the street is very narrow in scale, which matches the neighborhood perfectly. And when you see that, you see the Tudors and the Craftsmans, they sweep up from a 1-story roof line going up to a 2-story roof line, which is absolutely appropriate. They are not 2-story blocks or masses, so it really brings down the massing and the scale of the architecture. So for all those reasons, I think the project architecturally and stylistically is a good match. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Noel Cross.
Hi, my name is Noel Cross. I live in San Jose, and I do mostly custom residential, high-end, larger homes and hillside homes. And but I'm also, my practice is I'm a sustainable architect. I do a lot of green building, and I'm also a city and regional planner, and been reading a lot about sustainable neighborhoods, which is a growing trend. And one of the main concepts of sustainable neighborhoods is a good mix of several different housing types, and smaller homes, medium-sized homes, large homes, and that's in a sense what we have here in this neighborhood. We get the bigger homes along the boulevard, the big stately, sort of early landowners. We've got a bunch of smaller homes on Caldwell and several other people. I can't think of the names of the streets. Filmer. And then these appear to be what they would be the medium-sized homes. And what's good about that, and that's one of the main tenets of a sustainable neighborhood, because what it allows is people from different income levels to stay in the neighborhood. They can start in the smaller homes, the 700 square foot, the 900 square foot, the 1,000 square foot. When they get into a family situation and their income level has gone up, they could buy one of these medium-sized homes that's being proposed here. And then if they really are well off, they can live in one of these larger homes. And why is that good? Because they'll stay in this neighborhood. They'll actually stay in this neighborhood. And that's good for community because they stay in the neighborhood. I think the traffic numbers are probably right, because I think a lot of the people who live in these neighborhoods will walk to town. You're close enough. You're within walking distance of some of the shops and amenities right down there in Los Gatos. So I fully support this project. I think it's wonderful. I think there could have been even more lots and even more mix of housing types, smaller homes, the duplexes and things. I think would have been a really good idea, because you could have had even more range of income types and having a whole range of people from 20-year-olds to, retirees. And so I fully support the project. I think it's a good mix.
Thank you. Other questions? That was the last speaker card I had, so I will go back to the applicant now, Mr. Robeson.
Thank you, Chair. There was a lot said about the project, and what I wanted to say is this: it's centered around traffic, and one of the things that the last speaker talked about was sustainability and walkability. This property is walking distance to schools, walking distance to downtown. All the more reason for more density, and that's in part why we started with 30 homes here. It made more sense. But with staff and their comments and other input, the density has been driven down. Our density, as staff mentioned earlier, is 7 units to the acre. The general plan designation for this site is 5 to 12. We're at the low end of the density range, and the housing element says that when you're at this density range, you should be at the high end, and we're at the low end. So I think that that's important to remember. That said, with respect to traffic, as somebody else mentioned, that we are widening the street along our frontage, and the traffic engineers recommended that we widen the street along Caldwell, and we're also widening the street along Los Gatos Boulevard. I'd like to conclude by saying that with respect to traffic, we are open to continuing to work with neighbors. Someone at the Sunday meeting mentioned that we put a sign out on at the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Caldwell to restrict ride-in traffic, because the traffic and the problems are most apparent in the morning when people are going to the high school. They can't go out that direction, but they can come in, and we're willing to, in addition to the improvements we're making, continue to work with the neighborhood and the town to see what we can do to be part of the solution with respect to traffic. I think the project does a lot of good things. It restores a historic home, but more than that, it restores a character. And as mentioned, the lotting pattern is exactly the same as what is was on that Sanborn map in terms of the size of lots along Caldwell, and the character of those homes that we're designing represent the very best in architectural design as was described. And I think when you have the opportunity to have a walkable project, have one that restores the character to a neighborhood and removes a blight, as Mr. Davis talked about, in infill requirements, I think that makes a good project and is absolutely consistent with the town's general plan and its policies. I ask that you support this project tonight. Thank you.
Are there questions of the speaker? Okay, you have a pending question, I know, but do you have a question, speaker? Sure, go ahead. Commissioner Sayoc.
Okay. We met the first time that you presented this to the Historic Preservation Committee. I think that was in, let me grab my notes. And at that, one of the speakers had talked about the demolition of the Caldwell homes. There were 3 bungalows. And when I was sitting on it in 2006, we had recommended that you try and retain them. A year went by, and you came back, and with more information, it was determined that you could demolish it. Could you just, for the record, state what happened in that year and what other information you had?
Yeah, thank you for the question. My recollection of that meeting and my recollection of the minutes from that meeting and following up that meeting was never that we absolutely saved those buildings. It was an alternative. It was one of 2 alternatives, that you either save those buildings, and if you don't, that you that the homes and the style of the architecture be consistent with the character of the town. And we did the structural analysis as was required. And the big idea here has always been the Thrash House. And I said it then, and I'll say it now. It makes the most sense to take the resources and concentrate on there. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Those homes are inappropriate to save. Yes, they're old homes, but they're not significant. They're not unusual. No one of importance lived there. There's no reason to save those houses, and that's why the board recommended that those homes be demolished. With respect to the blight issue, I would like to address that, if I could. The original hospital user went bankrupt. We had opportunities to release the building, but it was for a longer term. We were in the middle of our application last fall when they filed for bankruptcy. In order for us to have the ability to restore this restore the Thrash House and to do the things we want to do, we could not put another hospital user in there. And so for the past year, we've forfeited the rental income that we would have had in order to develop the site. And we have put fencing around. I think we've been good stewards of the property along the way, making sure that it has not fallen into a worse condition.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Another issue that was brought up was parking. I don't have all the details memorized. Are there any parking spaces that will be on Caldwell itself?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why the street is being widened. As some of the speakers mentioned, that you have to park your car on the sidewalk, and when we widen it 6 feet, that's going to be eliminated.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Sal. Why don't you just
Okay, I'll just keep going.
asking.
This wasn't raised during the public comment, but one of your lots that the architect had raised was Lot 9, which he felt was a flag lot. And I believe in some of your comments, you described it as you didn't perceive it as a flag lot. So could you just further clarify that?
Yeah, you can see that because it has a large porch out front, you can pick that up from the site plan, that little box on the right side of the garage. On the site plan, you can see that there is a large porch that you can see from the development. I don't think it's isolated, and I don't agree absolutely with Larry Cannon's comment. We think that it works.
Okay, and then I have a couple questions now on your initial study and mitigated neg deck. The first relates to the use of open space, which is something that our general plan strongly advises. Maximize quality, usable open space in all new developments. And one of the responses was that although you don't have common open space proposed, you do have outdoor areas. And yet your outdoor areas you're requesting reduced setbacks. So could you kind of just talk me through how those two issues are not in conflict?
Yeah. The reduced setbacks have primarily to do with the detached garages, and it doesn't make sense to have a detached garage pulled 5 feet off of a property line and put 5 feet behind a detached garage and a fence. It makes more sense to push the detached garage up closer to the fence line. You need to be close enough so you can get in there and you can maintain the weeds and you can paint the building. But the character of the neighborhood, which was mentioned by one of the speakers, is that you have detached garages in that neighborhood that are up against property lines. I mean, adjacent to our property, detached garages are right next to our property line. And on the other side of the project, on the Bella Vista side, people who have cabanas and pool houses I don't think they're pool houses, but they're cabanas, those are up next to the property line. It makes good sense. That way you concentrate the usable area that you have into the yard so people can use it.
So if I understand you correctly, so that reduced setback that you're requesting is just the setbacks that would normally be associated with the garage to the main structure?
Right.
And it's not the relationship between one house versus the next house?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I have some technical questions, so I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. And I've been trying to get these answered off of your initial study in mitigated neg deck with regards to the hazardous materials. So, the first one, there's three. The first is lead-based paints, and your initial study requests that a more comprehensive survey of lead-based paints be done. It was by your consulting engineer, Environ. And so my question is, has a follow-up study happened, and what were the results of those?
It will happen as part of the demolition, and it's required by the town that you've got to, we'll finish that, and we'll do more samples around the buildings. The lead is from the paint that chips off the building over time. I mean, it's pretty common in areas around old homes, and what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll do further study just to look at the exact depths, and one of the primary purposes is really to define your scope of work for the removal of the lead so that you can hopefully get a more competitive price, because the lead will be down at 6 inches, 12 inches, and in some places as deep as 18 inches, and that's really the purpose behind that.
Let me just ask one question, Commissioner Sack. There were, I think, three things that had to be accomplished environmentally. There was a question of groundwater, there was a question of soils, but as I understood it, all those things had to be investigated and approved by the regulatory body who was charged with that, and that is yet to be done, but that was what was required. Are you asking questions beyond what was required?
No, I'm simply going off of the initial study where it simply says a more comprehensive survey of LBPs is recommended by Environ. So the follow-up question I had was, has it been done as recommended?
No, but it will be as part of the demolition.
Okay. And then the next question I had was with regard to dieldrin. It says, again, in the study that one sample exceeded the California health screening levels. And so, again, it gets very technical, but since you exceeded that threshold level, were other studies done to determine that an environmental assessment didn't need to be further done?
You know, it's been a while since I looked at that, but I know Environ is, they're a conservative group. They're comfortable with what we're doing out there. They will be on site when we're doing our activities, including removal of that old, I don't want to call it a cistern, but the old septic tank. And so they are out there, and I think they're comfortable with the conditions. And this was not the first set of environmental work that was done out there. Two other developers who attempted to develop the site also did work, and no one has ever found anything of significance really beyond the lead and that minor hit that they found.
Okay. I'm just trying to be thorough, and so these are issues that you can pass on to your own consultants, that this is something that they should know that at least I'll be watching?
Commissioner Sack, let me just, I'm confused, because on page 10 of the mitigated negative declaration, under the mitigation measures, which I guess were 5, all of those issues are specifically called out and what there's supposed to be done about it. So I'm a little lost. They are to be done. They couldn't have been done yet. So I don't understand.
Well, actually, see, that's where I disagree. It said that it exceeded it, and then it went on to say that based on the other distribution, that no further action was recommended. The question that I had, though, that I would have asked someone that was more technical is, once you exceed it, though, what are the issues that happen afterwards? And that's something that would probably be in a technical part that I just don't happen to have.
Well, if it was just, it's been a long time since I read that report. I wouldn't have bought the property if I thought that there was a known environmental problem. I can tell you that. We'd have cleaned it up ahead of time. But if there was one hit on it, I think that's, in knowing the firm as well as I do, I don't think that there's a problem from that particular chemical, and they will be out there during the demolition and removal of the houses as well as the septic tank.
I believe those are my questions for now, so I'll let my other
Does
commissioners.
anyone have any more questions about traffic that I might be able to
Other
answer?
questions?
I'm waiting.
Right. Thank you very much.
Could I add one thing about, one comment about the traffic?
Let me save you that, because I don't want to give you more time after but we're going to get to that, because Commissioner Sayak, I promised her we will allow the engineer to speak on that, and it hasn't come up, so let's do that now. Commissioner Sayak, you were directing, I think, a question through staff on that, and I think our engineer is here, if I understand it correctly.
Right, and it was just to walk me through the study so I had a better understanding.
So if you could call our, which traffic engineer is
I'm going to
here?
let John Gaylord start.
I'll give you kind of the general overview, and then I'll hand it off to TJKM to clarify any. The town policy is to compare the proposed project to the prior project in the traffic use. When this was done, TJKM actually came on site, did traffic counts in May of '06. When you compare those traffic counts to the proposed project, it will actually be a reduction in traffic, the proposed project. So based on town policy, there is no mitigation required of the project if they are reducing traffic flows. So that's, in a nutshell, what the policy is.
Okay, one of the questions that I heard today during the public discussion was some ambiguity over 2006 data versus what's actually happening now that the convalescent center is closed. Is that something that we need to relook with newer information?
Suzanne, I might ask you for your input on that. I don't know the time frame. I know that 2006 was when they did the study. That's, I think, when I believe they started this process. It's been a long process. I don't believe there are any limitations on time frame, but I'd pass it.
Not that I'm aware of, and we haven't, the convalescent hospital closed, looks like the end of 2007 is the best date we could come up with based on when they got their last business license. And we don't normally go back and look at a project. It has been vacant for the last year or so because they've been continuing to work on the plans. And as Mr. Robeson explained, they didn't want to get another tenant in there for a short-term period that wouldn't necessarily work for anybody. We wouldn't go back and reassess it now that the facility's empty and turn the counts around. The use that was in place when the project started is the one that we based the traffic counts on, and the counts were done when the facility was in full operation, and that continued for another year or so, and then it became vacant. So we wouldn't go back and say now the existing conditions are we have an empty property and we're going to redo the traffic counts and then change the whole thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is I did hear from somebody about the fact that the crosswalk at Caldwell impedes turning movements, and that was a great point. One thing that's going to happen as a result of this project is the crosswalk is going to be moved down to Kennedy. So it's going to go from that south side on Caldwell to the north side over by Kennedy Road, where it will no longer affect those turning movements, and that should help the traffic flow coming off Caldwell in the morning, being able to turn right, people turning off of Kennedy, because they won't have to cross through the crosswalk and wait for pedestrians.
Commissioner Sack, we do have an outside consultant here on traffic too, so if you would like to get some more issues on the traffic explored, now would be a good time.
Actually, if I'd like to take a couple minutes of that, whoever he is. Just, there's 20 units going in, and I still can't wrap my head around how can you only have...
I don't know who you're addressing.
Well, whoever the traffic engineer is.
Well, let's identify who we're talking to first. Can we ask the traffic engineer to come forward and identify himself?
Hello, I'm David Mahama from TJKM Transportation Consultants. Could you...
And before we start, I don't know whether the town attorney, I think we have a CEQA question essentially first, which is when we look at traffic counts, what date do we use? And we say we use the date when the project began. Subsequent to the project beginning, use went out. It is still there. Theoretically, could be leased tomorrow. I don't know what the use permit requirements would be, but the buildings are still there and could still be used. So the argument seems to be that if you use today's numbers, it would be an unrented building and therefore would have no traffic. And I guess I'm wondering if council has any legal opinion. We have a 2006 traffic study when it was in operation. We still have the same buildings, but it doesn't have a tenant. Do we have to have something done every couple of months?
No, I don't believe so. I believe CEQA generally allows you to determine the existing conditions based on the allowable uses under whatever rules you have and whatever threshold significance levels you apply to those allowable uses. Obviously, every single day the conditions in any specific site may change. There could be a vacancy. That doesn't necessarily change the existing conditions for purposes of analyzing what can occur on that site. Just to give you an example, if we were talking about an EIR, which we're not talking about here, but if we were talking about an EIR, and let's say it was an EIR for a base closing, CEQA says you set the guideline, you set the baseline for existing physical conditions at the date that that the military determined that the base should be closed. Now that condition may be very different in terms of level of activity from what will happen well down the line when the actual closure is being considered, or at least discussed in detail. So clearly CEQA is accommodating as an existing condition what the rules allow that site to be used for presently, not necessarily what is occurring on any given day.
Commissioner Sack, do you want to address some questions then to the engineer?
Yes. Just one more question. There's 20 units going in, and it says that it'll generate approximately 15 a.m. peak hour trips and 20 p.m. peak hour trips. So the first question is, if you're, I love the idea that everyone walks everywhere, but if you assume one household has a car, how do you get to 15 peak AM trips? And then the second question is, the PM peak hours, does that include school closing? So when does that start? Does it start at 2:30 when the elementary school, quarter of a mile away, releases its students?
Actually, the PM peak trips for this one is between the hours of 4 to 6 p.m. That's the time. Yeah. Yeah, and then the AM peak is between 7 to 9 p.m. peak. And then using a rate of about 0.2 students per household, for 20 units, we expect about 4 high school students from the project site. And so, and those 4 students, if assuming all of them drive to school, then we expect them to probably use Bella Vista to go to the high school if they do choose to drive. But, some of them might probably maybe bike to school or use other means. Yeah.
And then what about the head of the household going to work in the morning?
Yeah, actually, we used rates developed by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and the rates are 9.57, to be specific, vehicles per day for a household. So you expect approximately 10 trips to be made within the day. But for the AM peak, let me just put the numbers so it makes it clear. Yeah, I prepared a simple table here so we can see how the numbers look like. So for the project itself, this is the new 20 dwelling units with a rate of about, for AM peak, the IET rate is 0.75. So if you multiply that by the 20 units, you're expecting a daily trips of about 15 trips. You're expecting AM, a total trips of 15 to be made within the AM peak, and then a total trips of 20 to be made within the PM peak. And then also during the AM peak, you expect about 11 trips leaving the development. and then you expect about 4 trips coming in. Likewise, in the PM peak, you expect about 13 trips coming back, and then 7 trips leaving the units. So how we got the negative counts was that we took actual driveway counts from the project site. And with the actual driveway count, we counted 14 vehicles coming in during the AM peak and 7 vehicles leaving the convalescent property site during the AM peak. And then during the PM peak, we counted 5 coming in and then 19 leaving. So if you subtract these numbers from the expected numbers from the 20 dwelling units, we expect a negative, a net decrease of about 6 trips during the AM peak hour and then 4 trips during the PM peak hour. That's how we got a net reduction in trips from the site. Now, these rates are developed by ITE, and they took actual driveway counts from land uses that are similar to the land use that to the single-family homes that we have here.
Let me ask a question while you're thinking. If I understand correctly, as a traffic engineer, you rely on certain publications for some of your data, which you've told us about. But you also, I think, said you had an actual count for the 2006 period. So you're comparing the actual count of 2006 versus the books that a traffic engineer relies on. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, the ITU recommends that you take actual driveway count because that's what's more representative of the site. But in the absence of that, because you have a site that you want to develop, so you cannot tell what the rates are. So we rely on studies that have been done for land uses that are in that category. So based on that, you'll be able to estimate the trips that the potential project will generate. So in this particular case, you have a convalescence home. Although ITE has rates for convalescent homes, but it's prudent to use the actual driveway count of that facility. So we use the actual driveway count. And then
let me just ask you, your AM, PM peak hours, was that determined based on your 2006 study, or is that something else?
The AM peak hour, the counts were actually taken in May of 2006. That's when we...
What I'm asking you is, one of the critical issues was what are the peak hours? How did you determine the peak hours? And so I'm really asking you, when you define the peak hours, I forget exactly what, 7:30 to 9 and 4 to whatever, was that because of the 2006 count, or is that because of something else?
No, the rates are already established rates.
That rates, the definition of peak hours, how was that arrived at?
It was based on, we looked at the ADT counts that were taken on the roadways, Los Gatos Boulevard and Caldwell, as well as Bella Vista. And then looking at the counts, we were able to determine what the peaking was. So based on that peaking, we took the turning movement counts at that time, so that's representative of the peak time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sayoc?
I think those are the end of my questions. I'm still processing everything, but that's it for now.
Okay.
Can I also just add, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, that document is also referenced in our town ordinance and town zoning or town policy. So that is what we are supposed to refer to. So it's all in alignment with what town policy is.
And I would like to add that if we had used the ITE trip rates for the convalescent home, the net decrease in trips would have been even bigger. So we think that using the actual driveway count is more conservative.
Commissioner Sayoc?
And actually, one more question. Were any actual counts done during school release hours, which is 2:30 to 3:30, along that same segue?
We did take average daily counts, as you can see. And so this count here is for
Caldwell and Bella Vista. So you can see we took for a 24-hour, oh, sorry. Yeah, so we took a 24-hour count for the whole day.
I can't read it, so do you mind telling me, like, during that time period?
Yes. Oh, sorry, it's too small. So we took a 24-hour count that covers the whole day. So you can see that during the school time, which is about 2 to, I believe, 3, we have counts for Caldwell, Bella Vista, and Los Gatos Boulevard.
Okay, and can you relate that to me with the other numbers? Was there a spike during that time compared to the other times?
Usually school peaks are off commute hours. So they usually occur around 2:30 to like 3:30, thereabout.
Okay.
So it's off from the actual vehicle, actual commute peak periods.
And so can I interpret that it's actually less in number then from the
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Machici, did you have a question? Okay. Excuse me, you can't do that, okay? You can't, I'm sorry. Do we have any other questions of this speaker? I think our town attorney wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just, there were a couple of comments made concerning IT and what that means, and the town having adopted IT as a standard. Just for CEQA purposes, let me just quickly explain that CEQA talks about significant impacts on the environment, but it doesn't set thresholds for any particular type of impact that may occur. It encourages lead agencies, such as the town in this case, to adopt our own levels of significance for purposes of analysis. It's difficult to do that in every situation for every type of impact that can occur, but clearly traffic is a potential impact in almost every development project. So the town has, in fact, adopted those IT standards to use for determining its threshold of traffic impacts.
All right. I think if there are no further questions before I close the public hearing, then I will close the public hearing. And now I will ask the commissioners either to make a motion or to make some comments. And why don't we, questions are fine. Commissioner Sayoc.
Okay, I'm sorry to monopolize all the time. Within the plan development that they have here, it's proposed that a hammerhead be included in the PD, and I just wanted staff explanation of why a hammerhead is included. Because I remember at the last meeting we had a discussion that hammerheads were not up to town code, and so I wanted to see how that differs.
To whom is that addressed? Either one, I take it. Okay. Ms. Davis, would you prefer to, or Mr. Gaylord?
Well, I can't give you the background of how we arrived at a hammerhead, not having been the planner on the project at that time, but it's a private street, which is allowed through the PD, and private street standards are different than public street standards. And the fire department reviewed this and approved that turnaround. It wasn't required to be a cul-de-sac. And I can't tell you exactly why they didn't ask for a cul-de-sac versus a hammerhead, but they did say that the proposed turnaround was acceptable.
Okay, but it does meet fire regulations.
Correct.
In terms of distance. Okay. And then another question I had is, does this require a community benefit?
Not technically, because for two reasons. We don't have a net increase in average daily trips, and it is not considered an infill project, it is a redevelopment. Okay. We are tearing down one project, rebuilding with a new one. That's a redevelopment.
Okay.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? We're going to need either comments, questions, or a motion. Now, let me say this. Let's run through for a second what we're doing. One of the things we would have to do is find that the plan development is consistent with the general plan, so that's one thing before us. We have to make the required findings if we want to approve or recommend, I think it's approved, yes it is, the demolition of the 3 pre-1941 single-family residences, and then we have to forward a recommendation as to whether the mitigated negative declaration, the monitoring program, and the plan development application should be approved. That's a recommendation to the town council.
I have one question now. In any motion that may come about, is it a recommendation we're making a motion for? We're not approving.
You would be approving the A&S application for the demolition of the residences?
That we have to
and then the
approve.
other portions would be recommendation to town council.
To town council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Commissioner Sayoc.
And actually, I just remembered one question, if I could have staff clarify. There was a public speaker who talked about land use planning, and it didn't, and there was general plan conformance issues. And frankly, I didn't quite understand intensity versus density, and I'm hoping maybe you could explain that further for me.
I think the density is a little more definable because we have ranges that are allowed. We have a certain number of units based on land area, and intensity is subjective. We don't have definable criteria to say what's too intense. That's more of an element that you just evaluate based on what's being proposed and if you feel it's appropriate for the site. You know, the density itself is the number of units based on land area. And the general plan designation of medium density residential allows that density range of between 5 and 12 units to the acre.
Okay. And I believe in your staff report, when we started this, you mentioned that if it had stayed with its current zoning, how many units would have been allowed?
If you apply the R1D zone
Correct.
with 5,000 square foot lots, which is the minimum lot size, 22 would be the maximum possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Then there's a lot of things that go into that. Can you arrange the site layout in such a way to get a street in there, get access and utilities and everything? Sometimes 22 is not possible, but that's your potential yield. If everything worked, you could potentially get that many units on the site.
Commissioner,
I have a question. Just clear up one thing for me. I know this is a PD, but if this were a lot on my street and there were 5,000, it would be considered a non-conforming lot? Is that correct?
Not in the R1D. In the R18 zone
okay,
or whatever, the R18 zone would require 8,000 square foot lots. R110 would require 10,000, and so on.
I see.
So the straight R1 zoning starts at 8,000 and goes up depending on what that number is after the R1 designation. The R1D allows 5,000 square foot lots for single family homes, and if you have a duet or a two family home, a duplex essentially, you would have to have 8,000 square foot lots.
Okay.
All right, I don't want to wake anybody up, but does anybody want to make a motion, or?
If I could just get clarification for you, Mr. Chair, from you?
Sure.
No, not a motion right now, just more clarification. Within the PD, there were four issues that were identified in the staff report. That, I guess, is, because it's a PD, it can comply, but otherwise it would have required a variance. One was height. 30 feet is allowed by code, and 31 feet is House Plan 1. The other one was setbacks. How do you want to deal with, do we deal with those individually, or we're just one sweep of a PD?
My understanding is we have recommendations on that, and we could do it by saying we would recommend the adoption of those recommendations. In other words, I think it could be sweeping because you would incorporate by reference the staff recommendations.
And if you have any one of those that you have a concern about, you can certainly pull that out and make a recommendation specifically on that item.
If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong or help my memory, we have a 31-foot issue, which is versus 30, but we also had the studio issue on the garages, and I think that was that 3 feet, or what was that?
The studio is an option on one of the plan units for the detached garage, and it would, I think it's 22 feet or 22 feet 6. We wrote it into the PD ordinance in one of the conditions, allowing that height, so that if someone chose to have the studio over the garage, they could have that additional height.
And the other issue was the setback.
Correct.
The 2-foot setback.
There's 2-foot setbacks on the garages, and there are some setback exceptions for the residences sort of scattered throughout the project.
Okay, and I would also say that the discussion of intensity versus the number of units, density, right. The intensity is where you can say, I think it's too intense, and I would suggest that it not be that high, or it not have the studios, or it's got too many units, or whatever you want to say. But it is compliant with the requirements of 5 to 12. That much we know. Now, are there questions, comments, or motions?
Just one more question. Is the two motions required, one for the demolition, one for the recommendation?
Well, I think we need about 3 motions, because you've got the CEQA motions too, which is the mitigated negative declaration. So I think we need 3.
Yes, I agree. You do need 3, and I would suggest that you consider starting with the CEQA action first.
The negative declaration?
Correct. And see if there's a motion that can be made on that action alone, and whether you can take action on it.
You want to make a motion on that?
Let me remind you that there are 4 present. A tie vote is no action.
Right.
But I would appreciate it if you would also, I think you could say something further about that, because we're in a position now where we're making recommendations. And we can say why we're doing something or not doing something to advise the council, because I don't know. What I guess I'm asking you is, if we get no action, does it go on to the town council?
Okay. Well, let me just quickly run through your options. And now I'm speaking solely to the PD. Because your action with regard to the CEQA document and with regard to the ANS application are essentially final actions here, though they do go on because they are tied to the PD one way or another. But with regard to the PD, again, a majority is required to act one way or another. Your options are to send the matter back for further evaluation or modification, to approve as, I should say, recommend approval as currently proposed, to recommend approval with modifications, including changing any of the conditions or any of the features that you see, or recommending a change in any of the features you see on the proposed map. You can deny outright. Or, if you cannot reach a consensus regarding an action, we have previously and can today allow you to essentially recommend that the PD go forward to council with no recommendation up or down, but rather with your individual comments made part of the record with regard to the PD. It's our hope that you take an action recommending either approval or denial of the PD, because that gives council a better idea of what you really feel about the project. But if you cannot reach a consensus, and it would be difficult, of course, with only 4, then again you can send it on with no up or down recommendation, but instead with individual comments.
Now, if we take these one at a time, we can find out whether we'll get the 4 votes we need.
Okay.
If we don't, then we can consider whether we'll follow the other recommendation.
I'm going to make a motion to recommend for the recommendation of approval on the following to the town council: the mitigated negative declaration that we received. Is that one by itself, or do I mention the other 2?
So
I'm recommending.
So the first motion would be to recommend approval of the or acceptance of the, or I should say, adoption of the mitigated negative declaration.
Right, the adoption.
I think that would be a standalone motion.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Right?
All right. So do we have a second to that motion? We have a second from Commissioner Erickson. Is there discussion? Yes, Commissioner Sayoc.
I just caught, it's a minor housekeeping that staff can easily remedy. Normally, all of the mitigations we put in our mitigated neg deck are in the monitoring report as well as in our condition of approval. And I just caught, just doing a quick count, there were 2 archaeological that were left out. There's 4 listed on the neg deck, and then 2.
So I think the motion is to recommend approval or adoption of the mitigated negative declaration with all of the mitigation measures that are identified in the initial study and on the relevant documents.
I'll change it to that.
All right. So we have a motion, and the seconder agrees with that. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's the four of us. That's unanimous as far as this group is gone. We have 3 commissioners who have been recused. All right. So that's the first issue. The second issue, the issue before us is the plan development consistent with the general plan? And so that is a consideration we could next take. Is there a motion on that?
Okay, I will make a motion. I'll make a motion that well, are we talking that's a finding I'm going to.
If you look, yeah, right. If you look at the second page of the report.
It's the plan development. So I'm going to recommend approval of the plan development to the council, right?
With the finding.
With the finding that the proposed zone change is consistent with the general plan and its elements.
Okay, so that's the motion?
Yes, is that correct?
That's correct. I am assuming that your finding regarding consistency with the general plan is based on the evidence contained in the staff report.
Yes.
All right, that's the motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Erickson, is there discussion? Yes, Commissioner Sayoc.
Okay, this is where I'm having difficulties with the general sweep. I understand it's subjective, but I do think that the development is too intense. And so I'm going to give some specifics that I don't agree with. I don't agree with reduced setbacks. I understand the rationale for the detached garages. That makes sense to me. But it also shows in the staff report that there are some homes that have reduced setbacks in yard. And given that there's no common open space and some elements of our general plan strongly speaks of open space for planned developments and making it more usable and making it more prominent, I can't reconcile the inconsistency of having reduced yards for some homes when there's no larger area that some of these families can move towards. Maybe that can address some of the intensity. That's definitely one step that I would like to see this move towards. I also am not comfortable with the accessory structures being exceeded in 15-foot height. I think if there are neighbors that are already concerned about intensity well, I'm not even going to talk about density, but just intensity or the overcrowded feeling that some people feel, having two-story structures on a site isn't going to make the problem any better. And so that's another concrete thing where I can say I disagree with. House Plan 1, 31 feet versus 30, I'm not going to squabble over 1 foot. But for those 2 reasons, I can't just approve the plan development as it is.
With that being the case, it's clear that the motion will not pass. And as I understand the second recommendation, it takes all 4 votes.
No, 3.
3 votes. Oh, is that all it takes?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it took all 4.
No, a tie would be no.
Okay. All right. Are there any other discussions on that?
Excuse me, I'd just like to get clarification from the comments. Is she stating that she's not going to vote for it because of that, or is she making recommendations what we should do to get it approved? Do you want additions on it, or do you want to at least try to? I mean,
is this well, I guess I'm
not sure.
Is this something that
that's what I'm asking.
I'd like your thoughts. Is this something where no one really shared their opinions on these exceptions?
Well, let me ask a question. I understood that the latter part of your comments is saying you didn't know what it would take, but there were other things such as the setbacks, which were not the garage setbacks, which bothered you, and you didn't know what it would take. I don't know that any of us sitting here today could redesign to that degree. In fact, we ought not to redesign.
Well, right. We certainly don't want to redesign, but I could say those 2 elements, if you had what would the plan look like if you removed those? What would it look like if you had if it were in conformance with the setbacks? Would that mean that it was 1 less house that's something I can't answer. But I'll just leave it as the two concrete things that I can't support is reduced setback or height.
Since there's no comments, I'd ask for a call on that.
All right, I want to make a comment.
Yeah.
Charles, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I guess I would be sympathetic to the issue of whether there should be the exception for the studios above the garage. I haven't heard a particularly compelling argument about why that would be necessary, and I understand it's an option to do, if I understand that's right. But I would be sympathetic to introducing a potential condition that not be included as an exception.
All right. My comment, I would agree with that. I also have some real questions about the intensity. On the other hand, I'm not in a position to redesign this, and one has to recognize that no matter what was done 40 or 50 years ago, the market is different today. I think it is a beautiful project. That doesn't mean that it's perfect, and therefore, for example, the possibility of adding on the top of the garage, I see no need for that, and it does add to the intensity. As far as the setback on the garages, that doesn't bother me at all. I don't have before me, nor did we hear tonight, the other setbacks that might trouble us, and that we're not going to sit here tonight and pick them out. But I did want to say that although I am in support of this, I would agree with Commissioner Erickson, and I think we could, and Commissioner Sack, we could certainly approve, but not including the studio elevations. That we could easily do. As far as the garage setbacks, I would not argue with that. That is to say, I would approve that. As far as the other setbacks are concerned, I'm not in a position to deal with those. So I would support the motion. I would ask the maker of the motion if he would consider removing making this such that we're not approving the elevation and height on the garages to accommodate the optional studios.
Okay. And both of you feel that exactly? Okay, and that would make you happier, but not that happy. I will include that in the motion.
And will the seconder accept that modification?
Absolutely.
So the motion at this point in time would be to recommend approval of the PD with the single modification that the
studio not be,
that the as I understood it, that the height above, what was the height?
No, the studio.
Not be permitted. The studio may go away as a consequence, but you're essentially saying that the height won't be allowed to exceed that, whatever that limit was, 15
feet.
15 feet.
22 feet. Okay, so are there any other comments on the motion? If not, let's, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So Commissioner Sayoc is saying no, and the three of us are saying yes, and therefore the motion carries. We have, I believe, only one remaining matter, and that is the ASA, or Architectural Site Application, for the demolition of the 3 1941 single-family residences. So we need a motion on that, and the findings are set forth in Exhibit 2, which I don't have. So hopefully somebody else does. Thank you. Do we have a motion on that? Looks like it.
I'll make a motion to approve the demolition of the single-family residences on Caldwell, and find that the reasons for it, they will be maintaining the town's housing stock by replacing them. At the historical meeting, we found no historical or architectural significance in the buildings or structure. The property owner today has no desire to maintain the existing structure, and the economic utility of the building or structure was questionable.
Is there a second? I want to ask council one question. There was a comment this evening that, in essence, we really hadn't discussed why these demolitions should occur. My thought was, in the record, we have the report of the Historical Review Committee, and we could rely on that as part of the record. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, that makes me feel better. Do we have any discussion on this motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have unanimous passage of that, and I think that concludes the motions.
It does, and I should just quickly tell you what the follow-up is. The action of the commission regarding the PD is a recommended approval to the town council. A recommendation of approval will automatically be set for hearing before the town council. I don't have the date when that will occur, but anybody interested will receive notice. Well, it should inquire with the planning department, but anybody within the 300-foot range of the property will receive a notice of that public hearing. The action with regard to the architecture and site application to approve the demolition is final with the commission. It is dependent ultimately on the approval of the PD. However, it is an appealable action. Anyone dissatisfied with that decision must file an appeal with the town council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. It must be filed upstairs in the clerk department. There are fees for filing an appeal.
Thank you all for coming. Now, for us, is there a report from from community development?
No, there is not.
Are there any commission matters? That being the case, we stand adjourned.